They say there are places that don't want to be found, land that doesn't just lie silent, but listens, waits. And when the timing's right, when you're far enough from anyone who could help, when the woods are thick enough to swallow your voice, and your tires are the only ones for miles, it presses close, and it makes sure you feel it. I didn't believe any of that before I drove into Cluane. It was late August, and the Yukon was already beginning to bite, the kind of cold that rides in on the wind before the sun's even gone. The kind that creeps in through the cracks in your van no matter how well you packed. I just turned 35, and after the kind of year that makes you question everything, my job, my relationship, my health, I did what I always do when the noise gets too loud. I drove, picked a point far enough on the map that no one would follow, and just disappeared. The Volkswagen had been my escape hatch since I was 26. A rusted 76 Westphalia I'd named Clara after my grandmother. She didn't move fast, didn't always start on the first turn, but she was mine. Built with my hands, littered with my notebooks, my tools, the knife my dad gave me, and the long, wandering kind of silence I needed to think, or stop thinking, depending on the day. I'd heard about Cluane mostly through backpacker blogs. Pictures of Mount Logan wrapped in fog, the glassy lakes, the kind of place that makes you feel microscopic in the best way. But none of them ever talked about the quiet. Not really. Not the kind of quiet that lives up there. I arrived at the edge of the park just after 5 p.m., sun still high but slanting, gold through the windshield. The sign was weather-beaten and half covered in moss, but still legible. Welcome to Cluane National Park and Reserve. And underneath it, scrawled in marker on the wooden frame, were the words, "Do not camp near Sheep Creek. Not again." I paused, just long enough for the engine to idle low, tick-ticking like a heartbeat. Now, I've been around enough forests, slept in enough strange places to know every region has its warnings. Sometimes they're about bears, sometimes people. And sometimes, if you listen right, they're not warnings at all. They're confessions. But I brushed it off, thought maybe it was a local joke. Or a bored kid with a Sharpie and too much imagination. Sheep Creek wasn't even on my list. I had picked a primitive site deeper in near the Desidiesh River. No ranger station, no cell signal, just a fire ring, a small clearing, and a 100-foot stretch of gravel road that led nowhere. Perfect. As I pulled in and cut the engine, the silence was immediate and thick, not peaceful, not clean, heavy like it had weight, like sound itself had been buried under the trees and frozen into the soil. I slid open the side door, stepped down onto the gravel, and took a breath. Something was off. There was no bird song, no rustle of squirrels, just the faint creak of branches that didn't seem to move with the wind. I shook it off. You don't want to let your nerves get the best of you this early in a trip. I've made that mistake before. Fear makes you invent things, shapes in the dark, rough footsteps that are just echoes. I told myself I was tired, hungry, overreacting. I set up camp, boiled some water for instant noodles, jotted a few lines in my journal. The light faded fast. Trees that were green and gold just hours before turned black and then vanished. Only the sound of the pot bubbling kept me company. I was sitting in my fold-out chair, headlamp on, when I heard it. A knock. Just one. Hollow. From the woods behind the van. I froze. Not because I thought it was anything supernatural. My first thought was bear, or worse. Person. I turned off the headlamp and waited. Nothing. I stood, slowly, ears straining for footsteps, breath, the crack of a twig. But the forest was still. Then another knock. Same rhythm, same hollow sound, but this time closer, like something was testing how far it could come before I'd react. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the trees. Nothing. Just tall, straight trunks vanishing into black. My hand went to the knife on my belt instinctively, but I didn't draw it. Not yet. "Hello?" I called out. The silence that followed wasn't passive. It listened back. I backed into the van and slid the door closed, locking it with a sharp click. The metal felt thin, insufficient, like a screen door between me and something watching. I didn't turn off the flashlight, just held it tight and stared out the windshield, waiting for something to move. But nothing did. No more knocks, just stillness. Eventually, exhaustion won. I lay down on the small cot in the back, boots still on, knife within reach. I told myself it was nothing, an animal, a tree settling, something explainable. But I didn't believe it. That night, I dreamed of snow, thick, endless snow falling in a silent forest, and buried just beneath it, shapes, pale arms, long fingers, eyes like holes bored into ice. I woke in a sweat, heart pounding, and the feeling of being watched lingered long after I opened my eyes. When I stepped outside the van that morning, the ground was undisturbed, except for one thing. A line of small stones had been laid in a perfect curve around the fire ring. I hadn't done that. I hadn't even gathered stones. Each one was the size of a fist, all evenly spaced, like they'd been placed with care or purpose. I stared at them for a long time. Something about the symmetry made my stomach turn, like when you see teeth that are too perfect. It's not the shape that scares you, it's the intention. It's the intention. I left them alone, packed up quickly, told myself I'd head south, find a new spot, one with people, one with sound. I started the van, breathed a little easier once Clara rumbled to life, and turned back onto the gravel road. That's when I saw it. In the dirt, right where my tires had stopped the night before, were tracks. But not boot prints, bare feet, dozens of them. Small, thin, deep in the mud like they'd circled the van while I slept, all pointing inward, toward me. I didn't move for what felt like minutes, just stared at those prints like they could explain themselves if I stood still long enough. I wanted to tell myself they were from the day before, that maybe a group had passed through earlier. Kids maybe, hiking barefoot. But they were fresh. The edges sharp, the depth clean. Whatever had made them had done it while I slept, while I dreamed of ice and breathless snow, and none of them walked away. Every single print pointed toward the van, and none led out. I backed the van up slowly, tires crunching over the edge of that circle of impressions. I didn't bother brushing them out or taking a picture. I didn't want proof. I didn't want something to show someone later. I just wanted distance. Fast. The road out twisted like it was designed to disorient. Pines on either side closed in, their branches stretching low like arms waiting to catch something falling or running. I gripped the wheel tight and tried not to blink too long. There's a kind of fear that doesn't scream, doesn't flail. It just settles in, low and cold in your gut, and tightens with every passing second. 10 minutes down the road, I passed a faded wooden sign, half rotted but still legible beneath the peeling paint. Sheep Creek, 1.4 kilometers. My hands went white on the steering wheel. I hadn't meant to go there, didn't plan to, but the road bent me toward it like it had other ideas, like something wanted me to see it. A normal person would have turned around right then. But I've never claimed to be particularly normal, and when something scares me that deeply, part of me wants to lean into it, touch the flame, see how hot it really is. So I drove in. The turnoff was barely a path, half grown with brush and pitted with age. Clara didn't like it. She bucked and rattled, her suspension groaning with every rut. The woods thickened. Sunlight fractured through the trees in uneven shafts, and then I saw the creek. Still, narrow. Barely more than a thread of dark water winding between moss and stone. Nothing remarkable at all, except the way the trees leaned away from it, like even the roots refused to touch the banks. I parked, killed the engine, got out. The air here was colder, not just a few degrees. Sharp. My breath steamed instantly, and the hairs on my arms stood up like they were listening before I was. The silence was total, but it wasn't empty. I stepped forward and heard it. A faint, rhythmic click, not loud, barely there, like someone tapping bone against stone underwater. I followed it. Not far. Just 50 feet, past a fallen pine and a ring of mushrooms so perfect it made my stomach turn again. That's when I found the fire pit. Not a real one, not like the ring I'd used back at Desadash. This was older, sunk into the earth like it had been used for generations. Bones scattered inside, small mostly, animal maybe. A few larger ones I didn't look too closely at. And surrounding it, in a perfect outward spiral, were more stones. Same size, same spacing, same intention. I backed away. Slowly, I turned to go and caught something in the corner of my eye. A tree, maybe 10 feet from the pit, with deep vertical scars down the bark. Not claw marks, not natural, like they'd been carved with something sharp. And at the base of that tree, a boot. Just one, half buried in leaves, worn smooth with time. Inside it, a sock, still full. I felt bile rise in my throat. That's when the tapping started again. Louder now. Closer. I didn't stay. I ran. The kind of run where you don't look back, don't think, just let adrenaline do the steering. I slammed the van door shut, turned the key, and Clara roared to life like she knew what was coming. I threw her into gear and didn't stop until I hit pavement. Miles later, when the forest thinned and the sun finally broke through again, I pulled over to catch my breath. I didn't even remember most of the drive. Just that constant feeling of being chased, watched, studied. I sat there, engine idling, staring out at a field of tall grass waving in the breeze, and I told myself it was over, that I'd imagined most of it, that fear plays tricks. But that night, back at a populated campsite near Haines Junction, surrounded by other campers and flickering fires and the sound of laughter in the distance, I opened my glove compartment to grab my lighter and froze. There, sitting on top of my road map, was a stone, fist-sized, rounded, wet, not one I had packed. I didn't scream. I didn't throw it. I just stared. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I left it on the picnic table outside and locked the van that night. Every door, every window, slept with the knife under my pillow and the flashlight in my hand. But sleep didn't come easy, because what kept turning over in my mind wasn't the prints, wasn't the bone pit, wasn't even the boot. It was the spiral, that perfect spiral of stones, again and again, around the fire, around the van, in the dirt, on the map. Like something wasn't chasing me. It was marking me, claiming something. I tried to pretend it didn't mean anything. That stone, that smooth, wet stone sitting on my map like it had always belonged there. I told myself maybe I dropped it, carried it from the creek by mistake. Maybe it rolled in from someone else's sight. Some harmless, logical answer that didn't involve things walking barefoot through the dark or drawing spirals around my home while I slept. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some part of me recognized the message. The spiral wasn't meant to scare me off. It was a boundary, and I had stepped over it. The next morning, I left Cluane. That had been the plan anyway, to head east toward Whitehorse and pick up the Alaska Highway again, but nothing felt the same. The sunlight was brighter than I remembered. The trees looked older, bent in ways I couldn't explain. I kept checking the mirrors, kept glancing at the sky like it might shift and show me something I hadn't seen before. But the strangest thing, the silence was following me. Even in the towns, in the gas stations at the visitor center in Haines Junction, there was a weight in the air. Conversations would pause when I entered a room. Yes, dogs stared at me, still and alert. One actually growled, low and trembling, until its owner pulled it away with a quick apology. And that night, camped again off the main road near Coydern, I saw the spiral again. Not made of stones this time. Sticks, thin ones, snapped and arranged in the same meticulous swirl at the foot of the van's sliding door. That's when I stopped pretending. Something had followed me. And not just in the metaphorical sense. Not just a memory or a lingering fear. This wasn't trauma or stress or a nightmare I hadn't shaken off. This was real. And it didn't care how far I drove. It didn't care about pavement or towns or locked doors. Whatever lived out there in Cluane, whatever left those prints, those stones, it had found me, marked me, and it was waiting. The only question was, for what? I decided to talk to someone. I didn't know what kind of person you go to when you've seen things that don't make sense. Priests, maybe. Forest rangers. But I remembered the woman at the gas station in Haines Junction. Middle-aged, sharp eyes, not the type to ask too many questions. She'd mentioned once, offhand, that her father used to work search and rescue in the park. So I went back. She was sweeping the front stoop when I pulled in. Didn't smile when she saw me, just paused, mid-motion laughed and gave me a long look. "You came back," she said. I nodded. "I need to ask you something." She stared at me for a moment longer, then set the broom aside. Inside. Her name was May. She poured me a cup of black coffee and sat across the counter, not saying a word until I did. I told her everything. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't leave anything out. Not the knocks, not the prints, not the spiral, and not the boot. She didn't interrupt, didn't look away. When I was done, she asked one question. "Did you see the faces?" My mouth went dry. "What?" She leaned forward, eyes locked onto mine. "In the trees, in the water, reflections that shouldn't be there. Did you see them?" I swallowed hard, thought of the dream, the snow, the eyes like hollow glass. "I don't know," I said. "That's good," she said, sitting back. "That means you've still got time." Time for what? I didn't ask, because I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She told me what she could, said there were stories, old ones, before the park ever had that name, before the signs, before the maps. The people who lived there knew the land was sacred, but not sacred in the way you think of temples or spirits of light. Sacred, like a grave. "Things happened in those woods," she said, "long before we had the words to explain them. And when people started settling nearby, building trails, setting up camps, they brought something back to the surface." I asked her if it was a spirit, a ghost. She just shook her head. "Not exactly. It's older than that. It doesn't want blood. It doesn't need followers. It wants patterns." That stopped me. Patterns? Spirals, circles, footsteps. It watches who breaks them, who disturbs them, and when it finds someone who can see, really see, it leaves something behind, a marker, a signal, to remind you it's watching. That's when I told her about the stone in my glove compartment. Bluff, she didn't look surprised. "You can't get rid of it," she said. "You can throw it in the river, bury it, drive 1,000 miles. It'll come back. It's not the object. It's the attention." I asked her what I was supposed to do. How to get rid of whatever had followed me. She looked out the window for a long time before she spoke. "You can go back," she said. "Finish the circle, end the pattern, but you'd have to go alone, and if you hear knocking again, don't answer it, no matter what voice you hear, no matter who it sounds like." She slid a small, weathered talisman across the counter, a piece of knotted cord with a carved wooden bead. "Take this," she said. "It won't protect you, but it might help you remember who you are." I didn't understand then. Not really. But I took it. And the next morning, before sunrise, I turned the van around and drove back to Sheep Creek. The return drive was different. Not just in direction. Everything looked changed. The road felt narrower, trees leaning closer than I remembered. The clouds hung too low, like they were being held down by something beneath the ground. And Clara, she struggled. Her engine knocked in places it never had before. The radio wouldn't stay on, and at one point, the interior lights flickered without me touching a thing. It felt like the van knew where we were going and didn't want to go. But I did. I had to. Something about what May said, the spiral, the unfinished pattern, lodged in my brain like a splinter. I kept thinking about those stones, about how they hadn't just been warnings. They were coordinates. A map in reverse, marking where I'd been, marking me. And if the land had been watching, maybe it needed me to watch back. I pulled off onto that same half road leading to Sheep Creek just before dusk. The sky was already going gray. The wind was wrong, not strong, but constant, like something breathing across the surface of the forest. I parked in the same spot, engine still running. It felt dangerous to turn it off this time, but I had to step out. I took May's talisman from around my neck and pressed it once tight into my palm. Then I shut the door behind me and walked into the trees. No flashlight, no plan, just me. And that silence. The creek looked smaller than before, but darker, like the water had thickened. And as I passed the fire pit again, bones now gone, though the soot still remained, I could feel it. The spiral wasn't on the ground anymore. It was inside me. Every breath I took moved in a slow curve. Every footstep bent left. My thoughts didn't run in straight lines. Everything curved like my brain was being rewired. And then I heard it. Voices, not loud, not screaming, just talking. Familiar almost. A soft murmur behind the trees, as if a conversation I couldn't quite catch was happening just out of sight. I turned toward the sound and saw a figure. Standing perfectly still between two trees, it was a woman, long black hair, clothes too thin for the cold, her face hidden behind a curtain of shadow. I called out. She didn't move, didn't speak, just lifted her hand. Slow, mechanical, and pointed behind me. I turned, and the fire pit was gone. In its place, my van. Except it wasn't parked on the road anymore. It sat right in the center of the spiral clearing. No path had led it there, no tire tracks in the dirt. It was just there, like it had always been. I stumbled back, heart thudding in my throat, looked around. The trees had shifted. I was somewhere else. Same forest, same air. But this wasn't where I'd come in. It wasn't Kluan anymore. It was the thing wearing Kluan's skin. I walked toward the van slowly. Every step felt like it took longer than the last. The light dimmed as I moved, even though the sun hadn't fully set. And when I reached the van, I saw my reflection in the window, and behind me, the woman. Closer now. Too close. I turned. She was gone, but in her place, in the dirt beside the driver's side door, another spiral. Not of stones, not of sticks. This one was drawn in ash, and at its center something glinted. My knife, the one I kept under my pillow. I hadn't brought it with me. Something had taken it, or something new about it. My hand hovered over it, and that's when the knocking started again. Not from the trees this time, from inside the van. 3 knocks, then silence, then a whisper, low and unmistakable, muffled behind the glass. Let me out. It was my voice. Exact, tonal, cadence perfect. But I wasn't inside. I was outside. My breath clouded against the window as I leaned in, darkness inside, shapes I couldn't quite see, but something was moving in there. Something with my face. It knocked again, smiled, and spoke. You broke the circle. Now finish it. I staggered back, and then the van door slid open on its own, just a few inches, enough to show me the inside. It wasn't mine anymore. The floor was covered in ash. The walls were marked with symbols I didn't recognize, burnt in, etched into the metal. And in the very center, right where I slept, was the spiral again, burned into the bedding, smoldering, breathing. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Something in my chest locked up, like the forest had reached in and frozen my lungs. And then I heard a sound that shattered it all. My own laugh. From the woods, from behind me, from everywhere at once. And that's when I realized there wasn't just one version of me. There were many. And one of them had never left Kluane. Numb, I don't know how long I stood there. Half inside my own van, half outside of everything I thought was real. It could have been seconds or hours. Time in that place didn't behave. It curled, bent, stretched thin like a wire about to snap. The trees didn't sway, the wind didn't move. The spiral burned slow and pulsing inside the van like a heartbeat carved into cloth. And all I could hear was that voice, my voice, laughing from every direction. Not loud, not mocking, just knowing. I backed away, stumbling, breath sharp and thin. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. It was something else, a frequency, like my bones could hear the forest humming. The spiral, I realized, wasn't just a shape, it was a system, a design, a set of instructions for something I wasn't supposed to understand, something too old to have a name, and I had wandered into its algorithm like a dropped needle in a record. The van door slid open wider, groaning on the track, and there, in the dark interior, I saw it. A shape, sitting cross-legged in the center of the bed. It looked like me, but not quite. Its skin was damp, hair darker, its face longer than it should have been, not a copy, not a clone, a reflection, the kind a warped mirror would show you if you stared too long, the kind that starts mimicking your movements until it doesn't. And it was smiling, not like a person smiles. There was no warmth, no invitation, just teeth. I turned and ran, not back down the path, not toward the road. There was no road anymore, only trees, black trunks, bark like cracked leather reaching inward, closing ranks. I didn't look back. You learn that instinct early when you grow up with fear. You don't feed it your attention, you don't give it the dignity of acknowledgement. But the forest had changed. The more I ran, the more it rearranged itself. Trees twisted, paths closed, my footprints vanished behind me in real time, like the forest was choosing what stayed and what disappeared. And then I saw the fire. Not mine, not anyone's, just a low, steady flame rising from a ring of stones at the base of a hill I swear hadn't been there before. The stones were smooth, wet, arranged in, you guessed it, a spiral. And sitting at the edge of the fire was another shape, this one older, not me, not human. Long limbs folded like insect legs, skin pale and gleaming like quartz under moonlight. No eyes, just empty wet sockets that reflected light without needing to receive it. It tilted its head when it saw me, not curious, not threatening, just aware. And then it spoke, not with a voice, not even in words. It entered me, slid in through my skin like a cold wind through a cracked window. And what it said wasn't a command, wasn't a riddle. It was a memory, not mine, but someone's. I saw flashes, brief, burning images behind my eyes. A man in 1924, camping at this very creek, waking to find his family gone. Every last one of them vanished without a sound. Only a spiral of bones left behind. A girl in 1962, wandering off trail, writing in a journal about voices under the moss. Her last entry was a drawing, a perfect spiral with her own name etched at its center. A ranger in 1991, finding a single Volkswagen bus in the woods, abandoned, doors open, fire still warm. No tracks, no names, no trace of who'd been inside. The spiral, I understood then, was not just a warning, it was a seed, planted in minds that were open enough, fragile enough, fractured in the right places, people like me. The thing by the fire tilted its head again as if hearing my thoughts, my memories, my regrets. And then it raised one hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn, but I did. And there it was, my van, again, parked at the top of the hill, door open, lights on. Only this time I was already inside, sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring directly at me. I blinked, and the version of me inside blinked, too. I waved my hand. It did the same, but the moment I took a step toward it, it stopped following me. It just stared. Expression flat. Then, without moving its lips, I heard its voice in my head. One of us has to stay. My legs buckled. I dropped to the dirt, breath knocked from my lungs like I'd been kicked. That version of me stood slowly, walked to the open van door, and placed something in the seat before stepping out into the dark. It was the talisman. May's talisman. Only now the bead was cracked, and the cord was burning. The fire didn't spread, it just burned, quietly, steadily, right there in the center of the talisman May gave me. The bead cracked down the middle like a split tooth, while the thread coiled around it, writhing in the dirt. It's like something alive, refusing to die. I didn't touch it, because the moment I looked at it, really looked, it didn't feel like a piece of wood and cord anymore. It felt like her, like every word she'd spoken to me in that gas station, every warning, every quiet fear she never voiced aloud burned into that shape, offered like a trade. I turned away, and the forest breathed. A wind moved through it. Not air, but pressure. A ripple, like a living thing exhaling. Trees shifted ever so slightly, not in the breeze, but as if stretching after being still too long. The figure by the fire had vanished. No footprints. No sign, like it had never existed, or worse, like it still did, but not where I could see it anymore. I was alone again, except for me, the other me, still standing beside the van, still watching with a stare that had no malice, no empathy, just stillness. I stepped toward him. He didn't move. 10 feet away. 5. His face was mine, but not from this year, from years ago. Before the breakup, before the diagnosis, before I dropped everything and ran west, this version of me hadn't lived through the spiral. He was waiting for it. And in that instant, I understood what the voice meant. One of us has to stay, not as punishment, as balance. Every story needs symmetry. That's what the spiral wants. That's what the land demands. If something goes in, something must be left behind. Not as a soul, not as a sacrifice, as a marker to complete the pattern. The spiral wasn't chasing me, it was teaching me. I stood in front of him, this other me, and we didn't speak. We didn't need to. He reached out, and I reached back, and our palms met. The moment we touched, the wind stopped. The trees froze, the spiral beneath our feet stopped spinning, and then I woke up. In the van. Parked back on the highway outside Haines Junction. Engine off. Keys in the ignition. It was morning. Bright. Cold. Real. The talisman lay on the dashboard, intact, but the bead was smooth now. No carving, no crack. I climbed out and looked around. Cars passed, birds chirped, the world had color again. But I didn't feel like I'd come back. I felt like someone else had left. But here's the thing no one tells you about surviving something like that. You don't come back healed. You don't walk away with answers. The spiral doesn't give you truth, it gives you awareness. Now, when I drive, I see them. The signs, a stone where no stone should be, a whisper in the trees that almost sounds like a name I haven't spoken in years. My reflection paused just a half second longer than I did. I know it's not over. The spiral isn't a place, it's not a legend. It's a choice. And once you've seen it, once it's seen you, you carry it. Not like a curse, like a mirror. That's the price of wandering into places that don't want to be found. That's what it means to camp in land older than memory, in a Volkswagen, alone, far, far from where people still believe the ground doesn't think. So if you're listening to this, if you're planning your own trip into the wild, if you're feeling drawn toward quiet places with no cell service and too many trees, I want you to remember this. Not every silence is empty. Some are waiting. And not every version of yourself wants to come back. So when you hear the knock on your van door in the middle of the night, and you will, don't open it. Not because there's something evil out there, but because it might be you. It was never supposed to be permanent. The RV, I bought it right after my divorce. A 22-foot Winnebago I found off a guy in Bend who said he only used it for trout trips. He handed me the keys and told me the air conditioner worked sometimes, but everything else was solid. I liked the honesty. I didn't need much, just something that moved. At first, the open road was a kind of medicine. I'd wake up to the hush of mist curling over the hood and the sound of birds that didn't care where I'd been the night before. I kept a journal, ate simply, learned how to change a water pump and patch a propane line. I taught myself to read the weather by the way the wind smelled at dusk. I told people I was between things. They'd nod politely, not pressing, and I liked it that way. But a year turned into 2, then 3. Somewhere in there, between things became the thing itself. I drifted west to east and back again, camping in state parks and BLM lands and out-of-the-way forest roads, collecting stories like burrs on my boots. People think living on the road means constant change, but after a while, everything starts to repeat. Same camp chairs, same burnt coffee, same stories around the fire. Until last fall, until Black Hollow. It was somewhere in the Allegheny Range, deep Pennsylvania. I'd been hugging the edge of the Monongahela Forest, moving slow, following the weather south as summer slipped into early October. The days were still warm, but the nights had that thin, biting cold that smelled like wet leaves and deer musk. I pulled into the hollow on a Thursday afternoon. The sign just said Black Hollow Trail Access, half rotted with faded yellow paint that had gone green with age. No campground marker, no pit toilet, just a dirt lot, a rusted bear bin, and the trailhead itself, a narrow vein of crushed rock that vanished into a dark curtain of trees. But there were 2 other rigs there. One looked abandoned, a weather-beaten old Shasta with a tarp duct taped over the roof. The other was a Sprinter van with Colorado plates. No sign of the owners. I parked anyway. I told myself I'd just stay one night, maybe hike the trail in the morning, see what was out there. The spot was remote, but not dangerous. I'd camped in rougher places. Still, something about the place made me turn down the radio as I killed the engine. The silence seemed to press up against the glass like fog. It wasn't wrong, exactly. Just thick. Heavy in the way some forests are, like they're holding their breath. I set up camp slowly. Didn't build a fire, just heated a can of chili on the propane stove and watched the light vanish between the trees. There weren't many birds. That stuck out to me. Usually at dusk, you hear them scrambling to nest, wrens, robins, the last few jays. But here, nothing. Just wind and the faint crunch of leaves from somewhere down the trail. I kept the curtains open as I ate, watching the edge of the woods. I wasn't afraid. Not then. Just alert. My gut was twitching, but I chalked it up to the isolation. Too many nights in too many quiet places can make you paranoid. At around 10, I climbed into the bunk and tried to read. That's when I first heard it. At first, it sounded like someone brushing against the side of the RV. A soft drag, almost like a coat sleeve or a stick catching the aluminum skin. I froze, listening. Then silence. Then again. Scrape. But lower, near the base of the frame. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. I slipped out of bed, heart hammering, and peeked through the window. Nothing. The other rigs were dark, no lights, no movement. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. The cold hit me immediately, sharper than it should have been for early fall. I swung the beam in a wide arc around the RV, then down toward the wheels. No footprints, no animals, no people, just leaf litter and hard-packed dirt. I walked around the rig twice, shining the light into the trees, calling out once, "A quiet, stupid hey?" That sounded pathetic the second it left my mouth. No response. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a branch in the wind, or maybe a squirrel. I climbed back in, locked the door, and left the flashlight on the counter. But I didn't sleep. Not really. There's a kind of half-dream you slip into when you're pretending not to be scared. You don't remember falling asleep, and when you wake, your body's clenched like it's been bracing for something. That's how I woke up. Sore. Jittery. Early. I made coffee, stepped outside, and immediately noticed the footprints. Not animal, human, barefoot. They were faint but unmistakable, pressed into the damp ground just a few feet from the side of the RV, leading from the woods and stopping just under the driver's window. I stared at them for a long time. They weren't fresh, but not old either, sometime between dusk and dawn. That's when I noticed something else. The Sprinter van was gone. No engine noise, no lights in the night. I would have heard it. The lot was gravel. The trees echoed everything, but it was gone. Just a patch of flattened grass and a half-burned log in a ring of stones. The Shasta was still there, unchanged, curtains drawn, no sign of life. I tried to laugh it off. You're being dramatic, I told myself. Probably just the van folks walking barefoot, maybe a morning ritual thing. Yoga types, who knows? But something in me broke a little. Not panic, not yet. Just the quiet shiver of realizing something had changed in me overnight. A shift. I thought about leaving. I did, but I was tired of running. From places, from feelings, from whatever the hell it was I was really trying to avoid out here. So I stayed. God help me. I spent the rest of that morning walking the perimeter of the site. There wasn't much to it. A crude loop where the gravel widened just enough for 3 rigs. Beyond that, a wall of trees that grew unnaturally close together. Hemlocks mostly, with some old oaks twisted between them, the kind that have bark like cracked stone. I couldn't shake the sense that the forest was watching, not just inhabited. Observant. I hiked maybe a quarter mile up the trail. It narrowed quickly, swallowed in shadow, and curved away from the lot like it had no interest in ever leading back. No signage, no markers, just silence and the dry smell of pine needles and lichen. My boots made almost no sound on the packed earth. Then I saw something. Off the trail, maybe 50 yards in, a piece of clothing. It was a hoodie, gray and crumpled near the base of a tree. I hesitated. Maybe it was trash. Maybe someone dropped it weeks ago. But there was something wrong about the way it sat there, not snagged or weathered, just placed. I walked toward it, careful not to twist an ankle in the undergrowth. When I got close, I saw that the hoodie wasn't old. No mildew, no dirt stains. The label on the inside still looked new. I crouched and touched it, still dry, but cold, like it had just been taken off. And underneath it, something else, a spiral-bound notebook, half buried in leaves. I opened it. The first few pages were lists, gear, trail snacks, dates, then a few journal entries. Sparse, bored, talking about the drive, the scenery. Then something changed. About 10 pages in, the handwriting became erratic. No dates, just phrases, sentences scrawled hard into the page. Heard breathing outside the van, didn't check. Third night, dreamt of dogs, one was missing its jaw. Feel like I'm being followed on the trail, but no one passes. The last entry was barely legible. Woke up and the mirrors were folded in. I always unfold them before bed. I stood there holding that notebook, my own breath too loud in my ears. Then a soft snap behind me. I turned so fast I nearly lost my footing. No one was there. Just trees. Layers and layers of trees. I backed away, almost tripping over a root, shoved the notebook into my jacket and made my way back to the trail without looking again at the hoodie. Back at the lot, everything was still. The Shasta? My rig? The sun was high now, but the air hadn't warmed the way it should have. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me, and locked it out of habit. I didn't touch the notebook again, just shoved it under the sink and made myself a sandwich I didn't eat. Around 2, I heard a sound. Not from outside, from the Shasta. 3 sharp knocks. I stood up so fast the stool clattered to the floor. I watched through the blinds, heart thumping. Nothing moved. Then again, knock, knock, knock. Not urgent, but measured, too precise to be an animal, and then nothing. I waited an hour before working up the nerve to step outside. I approached the Shasta slowly, flashlight in one hand even though the sun was still up. The vehicle was faded, white streaked with rust, the seams sealed with some kind of black putty. The curtains inside were sun-bleached orange. I knocked. Once. Nothing. I circled around to the door. The handle was rusted. I touched it. Cold. Hello? I called. You okay in there? No answer. I was about to turn back when I saw the note. It was taped to the window, just barely visible through the film of dust. Handwritten. Block letters. Do not open the door. Do not talk to it. Do not answer when it calls you by name. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Not talk to what? What calls me by name? I stepped back, then further, then ran, back to the rig, slammed the door, locked it. I started the engine and put it in drive, but something made me stop, a thought I didn't want to admit. If it knows my name, it's already too late to run. I turned off the ignition. That night, the forest changed. The wind died completely. No rustling, no creaks, just stillness so total it made my ears ring. And then, around midnight, the knocking returned. Not on my rig, on the Shasta. 3 knocks, then silence, then my name. Soft, close, not yelled, just spoken. Daniel. I sat in the dark, jaw locked, barely breathing. Again from the trees this time, Daniel. But the voice wasn't unfamiliar. It was hers, my ex-wife. Christina, but softer, higher. Wrong. My hands started to shake, not from fear, from recognition, because she used to call my name like that. When she needed something, when she was scared but she hadn't spoken to me in years, and she was 5 states away. I didn't sleep. Just sat at the table with the flashlight pointed at the door. Dawn didn't come easy. The sky lightened slowly, like it was dragging itself up from underwater. I opened the blinds and scanned the lot. The Shasta was still there. But the door was open, wide open, and a second pair of barefoot prints led from its steps toward the trail. I opened my notebook to write it down and found a message scrawled across the inside cover. You stayed. That's enough. I didn't write it. The pen was still capped. I don't remember the first time I cried out there, but I remember trying not to. The kind of effort it takes to push the fear down deep enough that it doesn't show on your face, not even when you're alone, like it could smell it on you, whatever it was. The day dragged on like molasses. I didn't eat. I didn't even open the door. I sat inside that rig with every window covered, every lock double-checked, listening. And the worst part? There was nothing to hear. No birds, no squirrels, no passing wind, just silence, the kind that gets inside you, worms its way between your ribs, and settles in your gut like rot. It felt intentional, like the forest had decided, no more distractions, just me, and whatever it was that had started whispering in the seams of my life. By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was in that goddamn Shasta. Not curiosity. Not anymore. Something more primal. Like, if I didn't face it, it would follow me, no matter where I went next. I grabbed the notebook, not mine, the other one, and stuffed it in my coat, slipped my knife into my boot, then stepped outside. It was colder than it should have been, damp and sharp, like walking into a root cellar. I kept my eyes on the ground, following the barefoot prints. They were clearer now in the slanted light. Too clear. Not just bare. Flat. No arch. No toes. Just the vague impression of a shape. I didn't let myself think too much about that. The Shasta's door was still open, hanging loose like it had been pulled that way and then forgotten. I approached it slowly, one hand on the jamb, leaning in just enough to see inside. It was empty. At first, then I looked closer. There were blankets piled in the molded with damp, a single lantern, dead, food wrappers, water bottles, and in the middle of the floor, a circle made from twine, small bones, bits of charcoal. Inside the circle, more writing on the floor, scratched into the linoleum. Do not open the door, do not talk to it. The same as the note, only this time it kept going. It changes shape, it waits, it listens. It followed me from the trail, it took her voice, then her face. I locked the door, but she knew my name. I backed out, quickly, quietly, but as I stepped away, I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Across the lot, my rig, the curtain had shifted, just slightly, but enough to see someone inside, only for a second, then gone. I ran, chest tight, vision swimming. I flung the door open so hard it slammed against the frame and bounced. No one. Nothing. The flashlight was still on the counter, the notebook still closed on the table, but there was a smell. Fresh, warm cotton, perfume. Her perfume, Christina's. The same damn scent she wore for 6 years, the one I couldn't forget even after we split. The one I had never smelled in that RV until now. I turned in place, scanning every shadow, every corner. My heart was thudding in my ears, not just fear anymore. Rage, because it was playing with me. It knew what it was doing. So I screamed. Loud. Just screamed. Leave me the fuck alone. And then the knock came. Not from the door, not from the windows, from beneath the rig. A dull, slow tap. 3 times. Then silence. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. By the 3rd night, I was hallucinating, I think. I'd see movement in the trees and blink, and it would be gone. I'd hear my name whispered in voices I almost recognized. My mother, my sister, old friends, all saying the same thing. Come back. You left me there. I waited for you. It was a lie, I knew that. But part of me, the part that missed being needed, wanted to believe. That was the trap. That's the only way it works. It doesn't chase you. It invites you, draws you. And when you're so far down in the dark that you forget what light looks like, it offers you a hand that feels familiar. I started writing in the notebook again, not out of habit, out of desperation, trying to mark what was real and what wasn't, trying to tether myself to the present, because time had started to slip. Mornings would come, but the light was wrong, too red. Afternoons passed in minutes, or they dragged on endlessly, shadows unmoving. And I started to hear something new, laughter, soft, like a child's, always just out of range. Once I heard it from inside the forest, so I stepped to the tree line just to look. I didn't go in. I swear I didn't. But when I turned around, I was 5 feet from where I started, and the prints behind me, my own, had vanished. I threw up behind the rig. I couldn't eat, couldn't drink. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my water bottle and watched it roll into the trees. I didn't chase it. Something had shifted again. I didn't know what, until I heard the engine. At first, I thought it was mine, some electrical short, but it was coming from the edge of the lot. And then I saw it, the Sprinter van, back in the same spot it had vanished from. Clean, parked, engine humming softly, lights off. I approached slowly. There was condensation on the windows, fresh. Someone was inside. I stepped closer and knocked. Silence. Then the window slid down, and there she was, not Christina, not the owner. Me but younger, cleaner, healthier. I looked at myself, that version of me, and it smiled, just slightly, then leaned in close and whispered, "You don't have to be scared anymore. You never had to be." Then the window slid back up and the van vanished. No engine noise, no tire marks, just silence again. That night, I didn't bother locking the door. Not because I'd given up, not exactly, but because I'd started to understand something. It didn't need the door open to get in. It had already gotten inside. Not just the rig. Me. I sat at the table in the dark, hands flat on the formica, watching my own reflection in the black window glass. I looked hollow, gray around the eyes, lips chapped. That wild look people get after too many days without sleep and too many hours second-guessing every sound, every flicker of shadow. The forest was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that offers peace. It was the silence of a held breath. Its breath. The notebook sat in front of me. I opened it without thinking. My hand moved before I could stop it. I wrote, "I want to go home." As soon as I finished the sentence, the wind returned. Sudden, like it had been waiting for permission. It pushed against the sides of the rig, gentle at first, then harder. The frame creaked, and from somewhere behind the trees, a light, not bright, just a glow. Yellow-white like a lantern. It swayed. I pressed my face to the glass. The light moved slowly, bobbing between the trunks, getting closer. There was no sound, no footsteps, no rustle, just that light. And then a shape behind it. Not clear, not human, something about the way it moved. Jerky, uneven, reminded me of a puppet whose strings had gotten tangled. It stopped at the edge of the clearing and stood there, swaying slightly, holding the light out like bait. And then it spoke. Not loud, not even clearly. Just sound, like a voice heard through a wall of water. Muffled, warped. But it wasn't what it said that made me back away. It was how it said it. In my father's voice. My father had been dead for 9 years. I backed away from the window. Tripped over my own feet and hit the floor hard. The light vanished, the wind stopped, but the knock came again, from inside the cabinet beneath the sink. Just once. Soft. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Instead, I crawled into the bunk and wrapped myself in my sleeping bag like a cocoon, staring at the ceiling, praying for the sky to lighten. I must have passed out at some point because I woke to the first real light I'd seen in days. Thin, cold morning sun bleeding through the curtain, and something was different. The air had shifted, not warm, not safe, but lighter, like whatever had been holding its breath had exhaled. I stepped outside. The Shasta was gone, not just driven off, gone, no tracks, no imprint. Even the pine needles beneath it were undisturbed, as if nothing had ever been there at all. But my rig, the Winnebago, was covered in handprints, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, flat, smudged, bare, like children's hands made of ash, pressed into every window, every panel, every inch of the aluminum skin. But here's the part that made my legs give out. They were on the inside. I sat in the gravel, shaking, unable to breathe. Somehow, sometime while I slept, they had been inside with me. And I'd never known. That's when I started hearing the dogs, not barking, panting, like they'd been running a long time, out of breath, wet, sloppy breath, getting closer. But when I turned toward the woods, there was nothing. Just that trail again, open, waiting, and a smell. Not rot, not animal, but cinnamon. Sweet, out of place, familiar. It was the scent of the pie my mom used to make in the fall when we'd camp in the Smokies as a family, before everything went bad, before my dad drank too much, before the divorce, before the silence. That pie was the last thing that felt safe, and now it was here, on the wind, in the middle of Pennsylvania, with no one for miles. I wanted to scream. But instead I whispered, "I know you're not real." And something deep in the forest laughed, not loud, just a single exhale of amusement, like it was proud of me, or disappointed. The trail was still empty, but the moment I looked away, I heard the footsteps, behind me, not running, walking, deliberate. I spun around, nothing, then I looked down. New prints, mine, leading back to the trees, but I hadn't moved. I swear I hadn't moved. I looked at my hands, they were dirty, with soil. Pine sap, like I'd been crawling, digging. I didn't remember any of it. And that was the first time I considered that I might not be in control anymore. That something, someone, was moving me like a chess piece when I wasn't looking, and leaving the rest of me behind to figure it out. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I prayed. Not because I thought anyone was listening, but because I needed to say the words out loud. I needed to remember my own voice, to claim something, even if it was only fear. I fell asleep with the flashlight in my hand and the knife under my pillow, and I dreamed of Black Hollow, of a mouth beneath the forest, wide and dry, with a voice like mine coming out of it, and the sound of my own footsteps walking toward it, smiling. When I woke the next morning, I was outside, lying on the ground beside the RV. The sun was up, thin and white, and I was cold, colder than I should have been. My jacket was gone, so were my boots. My socks were soaked with dew, and my knees ached like I'd been crawling again. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, looked around. The rig was there, untouched, but the door was open, wide, like it had been open all night. Inside, nothing looked disturbed, but it was wrong. The kind of wrong you can't quite name, like someone's moved all your furniture an inch to the left. I stepped up, hands shaking, and sat down in the driver's seat. And that's when I saw it in the mirror. A shape, standing in the woods just beyond the edge of the lot. Still, dark, watching. I turned, fast. No one, just trees. But when I looked back in the mirror, it was still there, closer. I slammed the visor down to block the reflection. I didn't want to see it again. I couldn't. Because part of me already knew what I'd see if it got any nearer. Not a stranger, not a monster. Me. But changed, the way grief changes you. Quietly, slowly, permanently. That's what it fed on. Memory, guilt, familiarity, twisted just enough to make you question instead of run. It didn't want to scare me. It wanted to convince me. I don't remember starting the engine, but I remember leaving. I backed out fast, tires spitting gravel, nearly clipped a tree on the way out. I didn't stop to close the cabinets or secure anything. I just ran. Down the access road, past the broken sign, no music, no distractions. I didn't breathe until I hit the highway. Even then, I didn't let myself feel anything. Not relief, not joy, just the numb, tight pressure of getting away. For 2 days, I drove, stopping only for gas and once to sleep in a Walmart parking lot, surrounded by lights and people and the normal sounds of shopping carts and car alarms. I didn't speak to anyone, didn't answer my phone, didn't look in any mirrors, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I was free. But then on the third morning, I found something, taped to the inside of my fridge, a piece of paper, torn from the notebook, 5 words. You left the door open. I dropped it like it was burning. Stepped back, sat down, and cried for the first time since it all started. Not because I was afraid, but because I believed it. Because somewhere in the hollow, I had made a choice, even if I didn't know I was making it. I'd opened something, a door, a crack, a wound, and it followed me out. It didn't need to be loud. It didn't need to show itself. It just needed to wait. Because once you've been marked by that kind of darkness, the quiet kind, the kind that mimics your voice and slips into your memory, it doesn't chase you. It becomes you. Over the next few weeks, I tried to go back to normal, back to the road, back to the rhythm. But things were different. I started waking up in new places, forests I didn't remember parking in, trails I didn't remember hiking. Once I woke with dirt in my mouth and moss under my nails, and always, always the knocking from inside the cabinets, the floorboards, the back of my mind, soft, patient, familiar, and the smell. Sometimes cinnamon, sometimes perfume, sometimes old pine and damp leaves, but always something I missed, something I wanted. That was the trick. It never forced anything. It offered, the way a memory does, the way a ghost might. And I started to wonder, how much of me was still me? How much had I left behind in Black Hollow or on some unmarked trail in the dark? How many doors had I opened thinking they were safe because they wore the faces of people I loved? I don't have answers, only warnings. If you see a trail with no markers, if you wake up and the air feels wrong, if something calls you by name in a voice you almost recognize, don't answer, don't follow, don't open the door. Because if you do, if you stay just one night too long, it'll learn you. It'll become you. And by the time you realize it, by the time you finally understand what you brought back with you, it's already too late. because it never wanted the forest. It wanted you. I tried to burn the notebook. It was 2 weeks after I left Black Hollow. I'd made it down to Tennessee, parked near an old Corps of Engineers site off a lake that was half drained for the season. Wide open space. Sky so big it felt like a shield. I thought maybe the thing couldn't follow me there. Too much light. Too much wind. I set the notebook in a fire ring just after sunset, poured half a bottle of lighter fluid on it, and lit the match. The flames caught fast. Bright. Hot. But the pages didn't curl. They blackened, sure. Smoked. But when I poked the ashes with a stick, I found them still intact. Warped but readable. Like the fire had licked them out of politeness, not to destroy them. That night I heard scratching, not in the rig, in the dirt outside, like claws dragging slow arcs in the gravel. I turned off every light, didn't move. Just sat at the table with my head low and my hands in fists, listening. Then came the sound of footsteps, bare, padded, soft, approaching the door, one slow step at a time, then a breath, right outside the window. But I didn't look. I couldn't. Because I knew that if I saw it, really saw it, I'd believe whatever face it was wearing, and once I believed, there wouldn't be any going back. I left that campground before sunrise, didn't pack, didn't clean up, left the fire ring still smoldering. I drove until the gaslight came on, then kept going. I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I was just trying to outrun certainty. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. It wasn't following me anymore. It was in me. And the more I fought it, the more it twisted. It stopped mimicking voices, stopped knocking, stopped pretending. It didn't need to. Because now, when I was alone, it spoke with my voice, in my thoughts, like an echo with bad intentions. It started small. I'd lose time, forget where I was headed. Once, I pulled into a town in Arkansas and found a bag of groceries in the passenger seat I didn't remember buying. Inside, cinnamon sticks, an apple pie, a candle, and a note, taped to the bag. Welcome back. Another time, I found my name carved into a tree at a site I'd never visited, but it was my handwriting. I started sleeping with the keys in my hand, convinced that one night I'd wake up driving, or worse, walking into the woods with that smile on my face, the one it gave me. It doesn't need to scare you. That's the part most people don't understand. It's patient, kind even. It waits. It learns your sadness, your grief, your patterns. It wraps itself in your memories. It wears them like old flannel, soft and familiar, comfortable. And then it asks, wouldn't you rather go back to when you felt whole, to when you were loved? Wouldn't you rather stop running? That's how it talks. Not with threats, with comfort. It knows that horror isn't always blood and screams. Sometimes it's the ache of remembering too much. Sometimes it's the invitation to disappear. Just a little. One compromise at a time. Until there's nothing left of you but the parts it needed. I stopped writing in the notebook. I stopped recording. Stopped talking. People noticed. A guy in a Walmart lot asked if I was okay. I didn't answer. I couldn't trust my voice anymore. It echoed wrong in my ears, like it was coming from behind me. Eventually, I gave up on escaping and started trying to understand. What did it want? Where had it come from? Was it part of the forest? Or was the forest part of it? And then I started to wonder something else. The other campers, the people who vanished from these places. Maybe they didn't disappear. Maybe they stayed, willingly. Maybe that's what it shows you, the moment you say yes. Peace, belonging. Familiarity so complete that you don't want to leave. You forget that you ever meant to. You become part of the trail, of the trees, a shadow walking barefoot across the leaves, calling out to the next traveler, just close enough to recognize. And the longer I'm out here, the more I feel it happening. I forget names, smells, details, they blur, but I remember Black Hollow perfectly. Every branch, every sound, every second, like it's inside me, like it was never a place at all. Like it's a direction, a gravity, pulling me back. And I know now I can fight it, a little, but not forever, because one night soon I'll forget to lock the door, or I'll hear her voice again and believe it just long enough to step outside, and when I do, it won't take much. Just a few steps, a turn of the head, a glance at a light through the trees, and I'll be back where I belong. I've stopped checking maps. There's no point anymore. Even when I think I'm heading west or south or towards something familiar, I always end up in places I don't remember driving to. Forests that aren't on the GPS, roads that loop without landmarks, trailheads with no names. I pulled into one last week. No sign. No cell service, just a clearing near a shallow stream, ringed with stones that looked like they'd been placed there long ago. Purposefully. Too smooth, too evenly spaced. The air felt thick. Not hot, just dense, like I was walking through a memory. I parked anyway. By then, I'd stopped pretending that I had control over where I went. That night, the silence returned. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else. And the smell, cinnamon again, sweet and sharp, threaded through the damp moss and old bark. My childhood kitchen, twisted into something colder. I should have left. I should have driven through the night, windows down, headlights cutting through the trees until I hit pavement and noise and something that made sense. But instead, I sat outside in a folding chair, facing the woods, waiting, and just past midnight, it came. Not a creature, not a ghost, just a figure, tall, thin, wrapped in a flannel shirt like the one I used to wear years ago before the divorce, before the road, before I started running. It didn't speak. It didn't need to, because when it stepped closer, I saw its face. Mine, but not a reflection, not like before. It was how I looked the year Christina left me. Hollow, cracked around the edges, that tight, forced smile I used to wear so people wouldn't ask how I was doing. It crouched by the fire ring, picked up a stick, and started to draw. Circles, spirals, a line that turned into a door. Then, slowly, it looked up at me and whispered something. Not loud, not even with sound, just a feeling. I didn't respond, didn't move. Just sat there as my own face stared back at me, waiting for permission. And maybe I gave it. Maybe I nodded, maybe I didn't. But either way, it smiled, stood, and walked back into the woods. The next morning, I woke up in the driver's seat. The camp chair was gone, so was the fire ring, so was the clearing. Just trees now, dense and wet and pressing in close. No road behind me, no trail ahead, only a narrow path in the trees lined with stones, leading forward. And that's when I realized I never left. I've been in Black Hollow this entire time. The roads I drove, the camps I stopped at, all of it was inside. A maze of memories twisted into scenery. A loop that looks like freedom but always leads back here. And I'm starting to forget what the world outside even feels like. I still tell myself stories that I'm traveling, that I'm documenting, but the truth is I haven't posted anything in months. I don't return messages. I don't speak to strangers. And the RV, it's breaking down. The generator wheezes. The fridge died. The battery won't hold a charge. And yet, every time I think I'm stuck, the engine turns over. Every time I run low on supplies, something shows up. A bag by the door, a loaf of bread still warm, a note in handwriting I almost recognize. Keep going. Sometimes I think I'm being tested. Other times I think I've already failed. Because every day I stay out here, it becomes easier to accept. The woods don't feel hostile anymore. They feel familiar, like a voice I used to know, like a song I half remember from a dream. And when I close my eyes, I see them, the others, the ones who stayed. Faces in the bark, eyes behind the leaves, not trapped, not suffering, just watching, just waiting for someone like me to give up, to come home. There's a hill near the edge of the forest. It's not marked on any map. No trail leads to it, but I've stood on it more than once now, even though I never remember walking there. Every time, it's just past dusk, the sun a fading bruise on the horizon, the trees rising behind me like sentinels. From the top, I can see the clearing, the one I started in, the one where the rig first stopped, where I stayed one night too long. It's still there, unchanged, but smaller now. Or maybe the forest is bigger. It doesn't matter. There are footprints around the edges. Dozens, maybe hundreds, some barefoot, some mine, some larger, some not. And in the center of the clearing, there's a single figure. Always. They never move, never speak. But I know it's watching me Waiting for the moment, I stop pretending this is something I can outrun. I've tried to write it all down, everything, to hold on to what's real. But even as I speak now into this recorder, I feel the edges fraying, words slipping, time bending, moments looping in on themselves like the way fog eats sound. Sometimes I hear myself talking when I haven't said anything yet. Sometimes I hear you, the listener, the next one, repeating this story back to yourself like a lullaby, trying to make sense of it before you park your own rig in the woods and tell yourself, just one night. That's how it starts. That's all it takes. One night, one invitation, one decision made while tired or lonely or open. And the forest knows. It doesn't care who you are, only that you came, that you looked, that you listened. And now that you have, it's already started, because that's how it spreads. Not with violence, with stories, with words passed from voice to ear, with details too specific to be coincidence. With a moment of stillness so complete, you suddenly hear your own name whispered back to you through the trees. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when it comes, you won't run. Not really, because part of you will want to know if it's true, if it's real, if that place you saw in your dream, the one wrapped in leaves and mist and memories you never made, was always waiting for you. And when you step off the road, when your tires crunch into that forgotten lot and the woods rise around you like a breath held in, you'll remember this voice. You'll remember my warning. But you'll still say, I'll just stay one night, and it will say, that's enough. This first section will span about 1,100 to 1,300 words and establish a strong emotional hook, immersive world building, and slow building tension. The story will be told in a grounded, first-person voice, emotionally layered, and shaped around real threats and psychological unease. Let's begin. Hidden dangers of boondocking in the Southwest. They say the silence of the desert is what draws you in, but it wasn't the silence that unsettled me. It was what the silence made room for. I wasn't new to boondocking. I'd spent years cutting through the interstates and 2 lanes, favoring gravel turnoffs over crowded campgrounds. There's a certain kind of person who feels safer when they're far from everything. And I used to think I was one of them. Until that trip through the Southwest. Until I learned that some places aren't meant to be quiet. Some silences are warnings. It was early October when I rolled into southern New Mexico, the kind of autumn where the days still stretch hot across your back, but the nights turn sharp like the land's trying to remind you it has teeth. I'd been on the road solo since June, and the loneliness was starting to settle in places I didn't expect. It wasn't just quiet in the RV, it was hollow, like something had left and I hadn't noticed when. The plan was simple. 3 nights off-grid near the Organ Mountains, just east of Las Cruces. I'd found the spot on a forum, some guy named Reggie, who posted a screenshot of coordinates with the words, "Best boondock spot in the state. Total solitude." Reggie had posted a few photos, low desert brush, the edge of a dry wash, and towering peaks in the distance lit up in that copper-pink fire the Southwest does better than anywhere. I don't know why I didn't think harder about how little context there was. No directions beyond the lat long, no follow-up posts, just total solitude. Back then, I read that as a promise. Now I wonder if it was a warning. The dirt road in was rough, miles of rutted track that climbed and dipped through dry creek beds and arroyos. My tires kicked up fine red dust that clung to the windows and seeped into the cabinets. The sun was already low, casting long, lean shadows over the cola and mesquite. I'd expected to see at least one other rig tucked into a corner of the landscape, but the farther I drove, the more alone I felt. I should have turned back when I lost cell service. Not because of the isolation, but because of the strange way it happened, like a line being cut, not just faded. 1 second I had bars, the next, nothing, no searching. Just the screen going blank, like the signal had been swallowed whole. Still, I pressed on. When I finally reached the spot Reggie had posted, I had to admit, it was beautiful, unreal even. The Organ Mountains rose up in jagged spires to the east, catching the last light like rusted blades. Behind me, the desert stretched flat for miles, the kind of place where you can see your past chasing you if you look long enough. I parked near a ring of stones that looked like an old fire pit. There were no signs of recent campers, no tire tracks, no footprints, nothing disturbed. That should have given me pause, but instead, it thrilled me. This was why I boondocked. To get away, to find the silence, to be reminded of how small I was. That night, after dinner, I sat outside under a sky so clear it felt like it might crack. Coyotes howled somewhere far off, and I let the sound roll through me like a lullaby. I'd always found comfort in their calls, proof that life was still out there, even in the emptiest places. It wasn't until the second night that things began to feel wrong. It started with a smell. I was inside reading when it crept in, faint at first, then sharper. A mix of metal and rot, like old blood on hot stone. I checked the fridge, the trash, even the gray tank. Nothing. I stepped outside barefoot, thinking maybe an animal had died nearby. The smell vanished the moment I crossed the threshold. Just desert air and the scent of creosote. I stood there for a minute, letting the cold night air press against my skin. Then I heard it, barely audible over the wind. A whisper. Not words. Just the shape of speech, like breath moving through a dry throat. It came from the wash below. I told myself it was the wind moving through the scrub, the air funneling between the rocks. But I didn't go down to check. I told myself that was just caution. In truth, it was fear. Quiet, cold, creeping fear. That night, I locked the RV, something I never did when I boondocked. It felt like admitting weakness, but I did it anyway. I even closed the blackout shades. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept listening for the whisper, for the creak of footsteps in the gravel outside. Once, around 2 a.m., I thought I heard something brush against the back corner of the rig. A slow, dragging sound. Not an animal. Something taller. Something feeling its way around. I held my breath, sat up in bed, listened until the silence felt like it was pressing against my ears. Nothing. When morning came, I stepped outside expecting to see tracks in the dust. There were none. Just wind-blown grit and the faint outline of my own footsteps from the day before. But the smell was back. Faint. Lingering. This time, it didn't go away. I packed up to leave. The rig groaned as I turned it around, tires slipping slightly in the loose gravel. I felt an urgency I couldn't name. I told myself it was just nerves, lack of sleep, dehydration. I drank water, ate a protein bar, took deep breaths. But I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to know if something was standing there, watching. The road out felt longer, the light harsher, the shadows deeper. And 20 minutes into the drive, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I was not on the same road I'd come in on. At first, I thought maybe I'd taken a wrong turn, missed a bend, misread the terrain. Desert roads have a way of shifting on you, even when they don't. The light changes, the ruts look familiar. Every patch of sand starts to mirror the last. But I hadn't turned. I'd followed the same path I came in on, or so I believed. I remembered the line of barrel cacti near the dry arroyo. I remembered the little rise where I'd stopped to take a picture of the mountains. I remembered the shallow dip before the old cattle gate. But none of those things were here now. And what was here didn't feel right. The hills were wrong. Not jagged like before, but rounded, as if worn down by something older than time. The plants had changed, too. Sparse, withered. More twisted than anything I'd seen just 2 nights before. And the road, I use that word loosely now, was barely more than a suggestion of track. Just 2 faint lines in the dust with no clear destination. The worst part? I still had no cell signal, no GPS, just a blinking blue dot frozen on a blank screen, like I'd driven off the edge of the known world. I slowed the RV, turned off the engine, opened the door, dead silence, no wind, no birds, no insects. Even the cicadas were gone. I stepped out, one boot hitting the ground with a reluctant crunch. The air smelled wrong again, thick and coppery, like breath held too long in a closed room. I scanned the horizon. Nothing moved, but I could feel something. Something watching. Now I know how that sounds. like paranoia, like sleep deprivation, like every horror story that starts with, "I felt eyes on me." But this wasn't vague, it was specific, directed, the kind of awareness that doesn't come from imagination but from instinct, the kind we spent thousands of years evolving for survival. I wasn't just being watched, I was being studied. I climbed back in, slammed the door shut, and drove. Not calmly, not methodically. I barreled forward like something was behind me, though I still refused to check the rear camera. I told myself I just needed to find higher ground, get my bearings. Maybe then my GPS would return. Maybe then the road would start making sense again. But the road didn't care about my plans. It curved when it should have stayed straight, dropped suddenly into canyons that hadn't been there before, passed between hills I couldn't name, and each time I tried to double back, the terrain shifted again. Familiar rock formations appeared where they hadn't been. Bushes I'd driven past now faced the wrong direction. I was trapped in a place that pretended to be real, but wasn't, and then I saw it. Off to the right, tucked between two low hills, was a structure. Not a house, not a shack, a trailer. An old one, sun-bleached and rusted, half sunk into the sand. One of those silver Airstream types, though the logo was so worn I couldn't be sure. The windows were blacked out, the door was missing, and something about it felt still, like it hadn't just been abandoned, but entombed. I pulled to a stop without deciding to. My hands just left the wheel. My foot eased off the pedal. A breeze picked up then, light, warm, and rancid. It carried that smell again, heavier now, like something rotting beneath the heat. I don't know what possessed me to step out. Curiosity, maybe. Or that dumb human need to make sense of things, even when the body knows better. The moment I stepped onto the ground, I felt it again. That hush, that unnatural silence pressing down on everything. Even my own breathing sounded wrong. Too loud, like it didn't belong. I walked slowly toward the trailer. There were no tracks in the dust, no footprints. Not from people, not from animals. The land around it was undisturbed, like it had just dropped from the sky. I reached the open doorway and leaned in. Inside, it was dark. Not pitch black, but shadowed in a way that suggested depth without detail. The air was thick with that coppery stench. The walls were stripped bare, the furniture gone, just empty floorboards, a broken countertop, and a single chair, upright, perfectly centered in the space facing the back wall. I didn't go in, but I stayed too long, because from somewhere deep in the trailer, beyond the visible room, I heard movement. Not loud, not aggressive, just shifting. Something was in there. And then it whispered again, closer this time. 3 syllables. I froze, because this time I understood what it said. Not clearly, not fully, but the rhythm of it hit me like a memory, familiar and terrible. It said my name, not shouted, not beckoned. Just said it, soft, deliberate, like it was tasting it. I turned and ran, not back to the RV. I don't know why. I sprinted across the dirt toward a nearby hill, my boots slipping in the dust. I didn't look behind me, couldn't. My body refused. At the top of the rise, I stopped, not from exhaustion, from disbelief, because from that vantage point, I could see the land stretched out for miles in every direction. But the road was gone. No track, no tire marks, not even the impression where I'd parked. The land behind me was just flat, undisturbed, empty. The RV was gone too. My rig, 30 feet of steel, fiberglass, and all my earthly possessions had vanished, and nothing but the trailer, that same sun-bleached shell. Just a little closer now. I didn't scream. I thought I might. I wanted to. But the sound caught in my throat like a fish hook. That trailer should have been 100 yards behind me. I'd sprinted, I'd climbed, I'd turned away. But there it was, half-sunken, windowless, hunched like an old animal beneath the blistering sun. Just a little closer now, like it had followed. I stood on that hilltop, heart hammering so hard it distorted the world. My ears rang, my tongue was dry and metallic. My eyes kept drifting to the edges of the landscape, as if something might shift when I wasn't looking. I waited for the road to reappear, for the RV to come rolling back into view, for any sign that reality was still beneath my feet. But the world had gone silent again. No birds, no insects, no movement, except wind, The kind that doesn't make a sound, but changes the temperature just enough to remind you you're not alone. And then footsteps, not scuffing, measured, even, coming from behind. I turned, slowly. There was no one. Just the rise I'd come from, the dry brush curling around the rocks and heat rippling across the sand like breath. But the trailer was closer. I don't know how else to explain it. Maybe 10 feet, maybe 5. I hadn't moved. It had. The doorway gaped like a mouth missing teeth. Inside was the same darkness, same air, thick with rust and memory. And still, that chair. Perfect, waiting. I stepped back, and then I heard it again. The whisper. This time, it didn't just say my name, it said something else. A single phrase that I hadn't heard in years, not since I was a kid, in the last conversation I ever had with my older brother before he disappeared into a canyon in Arizona and was never found again. It said, "You should have come with me." My knees buckled. I fell to the ground, palms scraping on sun-baked rock. My mind screamed. That voice was his. Not similar. Not suggestive. His. I hadn't thought about Peter in years. Couldn't. We'd both loved the desert as kids. Both restless souls, both drawn to silence. But he was always more daring. He was the one who vanished while solo hiking near Navajo country. No distress call. No GPS ping. Just gone. We searched. God, we searched. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers. Nothing. And now, that same voice, here. From a trailer that shouldn't exist in a place that had swallowed me whole. I stumbled back to my feet, lungs burning, heart screaming, move, move, move. I ran. I didn't know where. Just away. I scrambled down the far side of the hill, thorns tearing at my pants, rocks slicing my palms as I caught myself. The sun was beginning to tip, casting long shadows that moved faster than the light. Everything looked different in this half-glow. Unnatural. As if the desert had grown a second skin. I ran until I couldn't breathe. Until my legs gave out and I collapsed beside a half-dead Joshua tree that looked more like a warning than a plant. And there, in the dirt, I saw the first sign that I hadn't imagined everything. A boot print. Mine. Fresh. But facing the wrong way. Like I'd already been here. Like I was chasing myself in a loop I didn't know I'd entered. That's when the realization cracked open inside me like thunder. This place wasn't just remote. It wasn't just off-grid. It was hollowed out. Somehow, I'd crossed into a version of the desert that had no interest in letting me go. The stories came flooding back. Things you hear whispered over fire pits and half-drunk nights at rural RV parks. Places in the desert that twist on themselves. Places where compasses spin and landmarks vanish. Places the locals won't talk about unless you've already seen them. I used to laugh those off, called them coyote stories, the kind you tell to scare tourists. But now I wasn't laughing. I was stuck in one. I forced myself up, took slow, even breaths, tried to remember every survival lesson I'd learned over the years. Anchor to what's real. Retrace your steps. Leave markers. I tore a strip from my shirt and tied it to the Joshua tree. Then I turned around, and the trailer was there again. No sound. No footprints. Just presence. Closer, almost touching distance now. I didn't scream. Screaming didn't feel useful anymore. I whispered, "Please." And the whisper came back. Same voice. Same rhythm. But now it was angry. Too late. The wind kicked up, sudden and furious, pelting sand into my eyes, my mouth, my skin. It howled, and somewhere in that sound I could hear more voices. Hundreds, layered, calling names, asking questions, sobbing, laughing. One word kept repeating, "Stay." I dropped to my knees, covering my head. The air around me felt alive, tight and circling. The sand didn't just move, it wrapped, it gripped, like hands made of dust. And then, the wind stopped. I looked up. The trailer was gone. But I wasn't relieved, because now, instead of one, there were 3. Spaced in a triangle around me, each identical, each with the same black windows, the same missing door, the same chair visible inside. And I knew, without understanding how, that if I stepped into one, I wouldn't come out. I would vanish like Peter, like Reggie from the forum, like every damn story people told but could never prove. And I finally understood what this place was. It wasn't cursed. It was hungry. And I'd brought it dinner. I didn't run this time. I couldn't. Because something in me understood, on a level deeper than reason, that running was part of the trap. Movement fed it, struggle made it stronger. That's what it wanted. I stood slowly, legs trembling, sand coating my skin like a second, deadlier layer of sweat. The three trailers loomed around me, each one silent, watching, waiting. It felt like standing in the middle of a ritual I hadn't agreed to be part of. A ritual designed for one. I backed away, just one step. No sudden moves, just enough space to breathe. I needed to think, to remember, to fight the narrative the desert was trying to write around me, because that's what it felt like now, like it was writing me into it, like it already knew the ending and was just waiting for me to catch up. One trailer had shifted slightly, its doorway now perfectly aligned with me. That same chair inside, the same shadow sloping across the floorboards, but now something else was visible. A photo, pinned to the far wall. I squinted through the light. The wind had stopped, and the sun sat heavy and cruel in the western sky, baking everything to bone. It was a photo of me, or I thought it was. I couldn't be sure, but the shape was right. The shoulders, the stance, standing next to someone taller, blurred. Peter? No, not possible. I never had a photo like that. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. Closer. Just one more step. A whisper flicked across my left ear, so quiet it could have been a memory. You never looked for me. I froze. That voice wasn't Peter's. It was mine, and it wasn't a voice at all. It was a thought, a memory I'd buried. I stepped back hard, nearly falling. The trailers didn't move, but they felt closer again, like the land itself was folding in on me, like the horizon was turning inward, curling around me like a fist. I screamed, not words, just sound, raw, broken sound. I screamed until my throat tore and my knees hit the sand, until the sky vibrated and the heat became unbearable. And then, quiet. Except for one thing, a soft chime. Faint. Electronic. I reached into my pocket on instinct. My phone. The screen was on. Full bars, a blinking red notification, emergency SOS active. I hadn't touched it, hadn't called, but the call was made and someone was talking. Location pinged, sir, if you can hear me, we've got your coordinates. Stay where you are. Help is en route. Can you confirm you're still there? I dropped to my knees and laughed, ugly, broken laughter that felt like weeping. I raised the phone to my ear and whispered, I'm here, but the voice didn't answer. The message kept repeating, like a recording, over and over, on loop, not live, not real. I looked down and saw the date on the screen. October 17th, 2015. 10 years ago, the day Peter disappeared. The day I told the ranger he probably just got lost. He does this all the time. He's fine. The day I didn't go into the canyon, the day I left. And now I was back. Right where he vanished. Not in New Mexico. In Arizona. Somewhere outside Page, near the slot canyons the Navajo keep to themselves, the ones they don't guide tourists through, the ones they don't talk about after dark. I hadn't just lost the road, I'd lost time. I dropped the phone. It hissed when it hit the ground, fizzed out like it had been soaking in acid. I stood slowly scanning the trailers again, and now a fourth one had appeared. This one wasn't sun-bleached, it was clean, metallic. Modern. Mine. My RV. Sitting in the distance, tucked against a low ridge, generator silent, door wide open, something moved inside, not a shadow, a person. They turned, faced me. It was me. Standing in the doorway, waving, not a frantic wave, a beckoning one, slow, calm, patient. I took a step forward, and that's when the sky broke. The sky didn't tear with thunder. There was no lightning, no wind, just a sudden, absolute reversal of color. Blue became black. Sunlight folded inward like dying coals, and for one impossible moment, the shadows beneath the trailers vanished, replaced by a raw, pulsing white that seared through the land like bone exposed through a wound. And then, silence again. But not emptiness. Not this time. It was the kind of silence you feel in your teeth, one that grips the base of your skull and says, "This is the last thing you'll ever hear." I should have, or screamed, or prayed. But I didn't do any of those things. I walked toward the RV, toward myself. The version of me in the doorway didn't move, didn't blink, just kept waving, like a friend inviting you home, like a child asking you to follow. And as I walked closer, I noticed details I hadn't before. My boots were the wrong color. My hat was the old one I lost 2 years ago. The watch on his wrist, it was Peter's, the one Mom gave him before his first solo hike, the one we never found. 10 feet away now. 5. The air shifted again, temperature dropping like a stone through ice, every breath filled with a copper-sweet tang of something long dead and unburied. I raised my hand, matched the wave. His hand dropped, and he smiled. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't me. It never was. It wasn't Peter either. It was what was left after this place finished with you. It was what the desert wore like a mask. Your face, your voice, your memories, all stitched together with silence and dust. I stopped walking. It cocked its head, smile fading. For the first time, it looked confused, maybe even curious, and I realized I was choosing. This was the choice Peter must have faced. Reggie, too. Maybe dozens, hundreds of others. The desert doesn't just take, it offers. But the offer is always a lie. I looked down, at my hands, at the dust staining my palms, the blood crusted beneath my fingernails, the tiny cuts that hadn't stopped bleeding since I ran. And I spoke aloud. My name is not yours to use. The thing in the doorway twitched, like a reel skipping a frame. I stepped back. Take your chair, I said. Take your trailers. Take your tricks. You don't get my name. It opened its mouth, wide, too wide, like a snake unhinging its jaw. No sound came out, just light, blinding, awful light that had nothing to do with warmth and everything to do with memory. I saw Peter then, but not the real Peter. A flickering collage of him, laughing, crying, hiking, bleeding, calling my name as I walked away from the canyon rim. That was the moment I'd buried. The moment I'd heard him scream and told myself it was the wind. The moment I told the ranger I didn't hear anything. Because I didn't want to be wrong. Because I didn't want the guilt. Because I wanted to believe I hadn't failed him. The desert knew. It had always known. That's why it brought me here. Not to punish me. To offer me the same out. The same vanishing. The same piece of forgetting. The easy way. The clean slate. The lie. No. I whispered. You can't have me. And then I ran, not toward anything, just away, through the dust, through the stunted brush, through the memory of Peter's face and the weight of everything I'd tried not to remember. I ran like someone trying to beat time itself. The sky pulsed above me, light fractured around me. The wind rose, not howling, but humming. Voices. Every person this place had swallowed, singing, calling, crying, begging me to stop. I didn't. I ran until the light shifted again, until the ground beneath my feet changed from sand to gravel, until the air smelled not like blood, but juniper, until the sky returned to blue, not perfect, not vivid, just real. I turned around. The trailers were gone. The sky was whole, and 50 feet behind me, at the edge of the ridge, sat my RV, exactly where I left it. Door closed, windows clean, engine still ticking with heat. I stood there a long time, watching it, expecting it to change, to move, to disappear. It didn't. I approached slowly, turned the handle, opened the door. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. My book on the counter, my boots near the sink, a bottle of water half empty on the table. I stepped in, closed the door behind me, and cried until I couldn't breathe. I stayed in the RV until morning. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I didn't even move. I just sat in the dim blue light of the stove panel, staring at the door, waiting for the knock that never came. But nothing moved. Not outside, not inside. Just silence. And this time it didn't feel threatening. It felt empty. Like whatever lived out there had finished what it came for and found me too stubborn to digest. When the sun finally clawed its way back over the ridge, it was sharp and cold and pale. It didn't look like the same sun from 2 days ago, or 3, or however long I'd been gone. I opened the door slowly, stepped onto solid ground. It was the same land, but it felt different. No more looping hills, no more impossible trailers, no more folding time. I wasn't sure if I was back or if I'd just adapted to the dream. But my rig started, the tires rolled, and the road appeared again, exactly where it should have been. I drove, didn't look back, not once. didn't touch the radio, didn't try the GPS. I didn't want confirmation. I didn't want explanation. I didn't want to know if I was really out. Because if I wasn't, then hope would be the thing that killed me. I didn't stop until I reached a ranger station nearly 40 miles outside of Page. I pulled in, parked beneath a battered flag, and sat with the engine running for a full 10 minutes before I had the strength to open the door. Inside, the ranger behind the desk looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong. Rough morning? I must have looked insane, covered in dust, red-rimmed eyes, clothes torn, hands shaking. But I just said, yeah, something like that. He offered me coffee. I took it with both hands, fingers twitching, trying not to spill. And then I asked him a question I hadn't dared form until now. You ever hear about people getting lost out there? He nodded, eyes narrowing just slightly. Sure, happens more often than you'd think. Folks go in thinking they know the land. GPS dies, panic sets in. They make it worse. Ever come back talking about strange things, places that weren't on the map? He didn't answer right away. He sipped his coffee, set it down, then said, "We don't write those parts in the reports. But yeah, I've heard a few." He looked at me carefully. "What did you see?" I didn't answer because I wasn't sure I had the words. Instead, I just asked, "You know anyone named Reggie?" His eyes didn't flicker, but his fingers tapped the desk once, twice, then stopped. "No," he said. "Never heard that name." But the way he said it, I didn't press. I just nodded, drank the last of the coffee, and walked out. I've kept moving since then, haven't stayed in one place longer than a night. No more remote desert roads, no more forums, no more total solitude. Now I park near other people, even if I don't talk to them, even if they annoy the hell out of me with their generators and satellite dishes and screaming kids. Because I've learned something. Silence doesn't mean safety. It means something's listening. Something that wears your face, something that knows your guilt, something that waits until you're most alone and offers you what you never dared admit you wanted. A way out, an end to the story, a chance to vanish so completely no one will ever ask what happened. That's what the desert gives you. But it always takes more. I left part of myself out there, I know that now. I think it left something in me too. A sliver, a whisper. I still hear it sometimes. Late at night when the rig creaks and the wind changes direction and the coyotes go quiet all at once. It says things I try not to understand. It reminds me of voices I'll never hear again. It tempts me to drive back, to find that same wash, to follow that same road, to finish what was started. But I don't. I won't, because I know what's waiting there. I know the kind of peace it offers. And I know now, the scariest thing in the Southwest is not being alone. It's what finally answers when you call out. There are places in this country where the maps lie, where the roads keep their own secrets, where the air tastes like history and grief, and the ground remembers every boot print it's ever swallowed. I don't tell this story to scare people off the road. I don't want you to stop camping or boondocking or chasing that perfect slice of solitude under a ceiling of stars. I get it. I've lived it. I've needed it. There's nothing like being alone in the wild and feeling the edges of your soul expand beyond what the world normally allows. But there's a difference between solitude and surrender, and there are parts of the Southwest that don't know the difference. You go out there looking for quiet, but some kinds of quiet don't echo back. Some kinds of quiet dig in, twist things, reflect you in ways that aren't real, but close enough to lure you further in. When I think back to that trip, I don't remember the exact moment it all changed. I can't tell you when the road stopped being a road. I can't tell you how long I was gone. I don't even know if I ever really left. What I do know is this: that place found me because I was open to being found. I was carrying things I thought I'd buried. Regret, guilt, the cowardice of silence. The desert doesn't just see your pain, it amplifies it. It stretches it across the horizon until it becomes the only thing you can see. That's the real danger of boondocking in the Southwest. Not the heat, not the wildlife, not even the isolation. It's what the stillness reveals. And once it sees you, really sees you, It doesn't forget. I've crossed a lot of miles since then. I've changed rigs, changed names even. Sometimes I think about heading east, into green, into trees that close in and roads that end in diners instead of echoes. But I haven't done it yet, because some part of me is still watching the horizon, still listening for that whisper, still wondering if Peter's out there, not dead, not gone, just watching the way I do now, trying to warn the next person who drives too far into a canyon without asking permission, trying to tell them, don't follow the road just because it's there. Don't trust silence that feels too perfect. Don't listen to the voice that sounds like someone you miss, because it isn't them. And once you answer, once you let it in, you don't come back the same, if you come back at all. So yeah, boondock, go find your wild places. Feel the wind without fences. But know this, out here, not every mile is yours to claim. Some places don't want to be found. And if they let you in, it's only because they think they can keep you. So if you hear your name whispered on the wind, if you smell blood on stone or feel your shadow lag behind like it's trying to catch up, leave. Turn around. And for the love of whatever still watches the spaces between the stars, don't go into the trailer. They say the forest doesn't remember you, that when you drive deep enough, when the canopy closes over your rig and the signal bars drop away, you stop existing to the rest of the world. I used to think that was peaceful. That was before that road, that night, and the girl who stepped out of the dark asking me for a ride. I wasn't the kind of guy who spooked easy. 43 years old, ex-army mechanic, been living full-time in my RV for over a decade by then. If there was a trick to the road, I'd seen it. Summer hailstorms in Montana, flash floods in Arizona. A bear once tore open my side storage while I was asleep inside. You get good at knowing what to fear and what to shrug off. But nothing prepared me for that forest stretch outside Tillamook, Oregon. I had just left a quiet campground near Netarts Bay. Beautiful place, moss-covered for thick fog in the mornings and that salty, decaying scent of ocean wind mixing with the pine. I'd stayed 3 days, just long enough to enjoy the solitude without drawing attention. See, I don't like to stick around too long. People ask questions when you travel alone for years and don't leave a trace of your past behind. I was heading inland, aiming to overnight somewhere near the Siuslaw National Forest, taking those narrow, poorly lit back roads that never show up properly on GPS. My rig, a 2001 Winnebago Brave, rattled and hummed like an old dog. The forest pressed in close on either side, thick and wild. The kind of place that eats cell signals and headlights. You learn to drive with a sixth sense, to feel curves in the road before you see them. It was about 11:52 p.m. when I saw her. The road had just curved sharply to the right, and my high beams picked up movement ahead. At first I thought it was a deer, but deer don't step directly into the road and raise a hand like they're hitchhiking. She was maybe 20 feet ahead, standing still in the glare of my lights, her figure lit up in flashes as the branches flickered past. Pale skin, wet, tangled hair, wearing a dirty white hoodie and jeans, ripped at the knees. Her left hand was down by her side, twitching just slightly. I slowed the rig and came to a stop about 10 feet from her. In the passenger mirror, the forest behind me looked darker than it should have. No wind, no sound, like the trees were holding their breath. I rolled down the window halfway and leaned out. "You all right?" I called. She didn't answer, just stared at me, big eyes, hollow expression. No visible injuries, but her clothes were soaked like she'd walked out of a lake. "You need a ride?" I asked. She nodded once. No emotion, just that slow, deliberate nod. Now, here's the thing. I've picked up folks before. Drifters, campers who got separated from their friends, hell, once even helped a couple with a flat in the middle of a snowstorm. But something about her didn't sit right. The air felt heavier near her, charged, like a low-frequency hum in my ears just beneath hearing. Still, I couldn't leave her out there. I reached across and unlocked the passenger door. The handle clicked, and that's when she vanished. Not turned and ran, not faded into the trees. I mean, 1 second she was there, standing still, and the next she wasn't. Like a blink of light gone out, I sat frozen, my hand still on the door latch. My pulse kicked up, slow and deep. I stepped out with a flashlight and walked around the front of the rig. Nothing. No footprints, no rustling in the underbrush. The beam caught only trees and moss and empty road. I got back in the RV, shut the door, locked it, and told myself it was just the night playing tricks. Maybe the fog, maybe my eyes. Maybe I needed more sleep than a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee every 8 hours. I drove another 1.5 miles before I stopped thinking about her. And then I heard a cough from the back. Not loud, not aggressive, just a dry, subtle ahem, like someone clearing their throat behind a closed door. My foot slammed the brake. The RV lurched. I killed the engine. For a few seconds, I just sat there in silence, heart hammering, staring at the dark hallway behind the driver's seat. The interior was dimly lit by the dashboard glow, enough to cast shapes, not enough to see faces. I reached for the tire iron under the seat. I hadn't used it in years, but the weight of it felt good in my hand. Solid, real. I turned slowly and stepped back into the rig. My boots echoed slightly on the vinyl floor. "Hello?" I called. "If someone's back there, you picked the wrong damn RV." No response. I opened the bathroom door. Empty. Checked the bedroom. Nothing. Cabinets, closets, even under the bed. Not a soul. Still, I didn't feel alone. That night, I pulled off at a makeshift turnout beside the road. No cell service, no other vehicles in sight, and forced myself to sleep with the rig locked tight and the tire iron resting beside my pillow. The air inside felt different somehow. Not cold, just wrong. Stale, like the breath of a sealed room. I cracked a window, but the smell lingered, a faint mildew scent mixed with something faintly sweet, like lilies left to rot in a vase. Sleep came in short bursts. My dreams were quiet, but not empty. I woke up just after 3 a.m. to the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks, not on the door, from inside the RV. 3 slow knocks, from inside the RV. Not frantic, not aggressive, just deliberate. Like someone trying to be polite about something that should never be polite. That steady rhythm you feel in your spine more than your ears. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe for a second. Just stared up at the ceiling, half expecting it to knock again. Maybe from the wall. Or the fridge. Or worse, the inside of one of the overhead cabinets. But there was only silence. I sat up slowly, tire iron already clenched in my right hand, and waited for my eyes to adjust. The dashboard was still glowing faint green at the front. No lights back here. No movement. I moved through the RV like I was sneaking through someone else's house, checking corners, edges, shadows. I opened every cabinet again. Emptied drawers. Even peeled back the mattress. Nothing. But in the mirror mounted on the bathroom door, one I'd walked past 100 times, there were fingerprints. Fresh. Long smears that trailed down like someone had pressed both hands against the glass and dragged them slowly downward. I didn't touch it. I just backed away. I told myself then that it had to be a dream, that maybe I'd walked in my sleep, that maybe I'd left condensation, that maybe the knocking was just expansion in the walls. But the fingerprints didn't look like mine, and I couldn't shake the image of that girl, standing there, drenched, hollow-eyed, not scared, not confused, just watching, like she'd been waiting for me. The sun didn't rise for another 3 hours. I sat in the front seat the whole time with the engine off, every light out, listening, waiting, trying not to blink too long. There's a kind of silence in the forest at night that you don't really notice until you're waiting for something to break it. The moment light finally touched the treetops, I turned the key and left that turnout behind without even brewing coffee. I just drove. Straight through until I reached a ranger station on the edge of Cieslaw, some 40 miles down a winding logging route. And I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Told myself I was just tired. That isolation can play tricks. That people like me, drifters with no fixed address, are always just a little frayed around the edges. I parked the RV and got out to stretch, planning to stay the night at the nearby campground. Figured a night around other rigs might help reset my brain. I even spoke to the ranger, guy named Russ, mid-50s, gray beard, and a stare like he'd seen too many things to care anymore. "You came down from Tillamook?" he asked, chewing on a toothpick. "By yourself?" "Yeah," I said. "Last night." He nodded slowly. Didn't say much after that, but I caught the flicker of something behind his eyes. Later that evening, I made a small fire and sat in one of the folding chairs under the awning. Couple other campers nearby, young family in a Class C, older couple with a fifth wheel and two tiny yapping dogs, but I didn't feel any safer. If anything, the laughter and noise around me made me feel more alone, like I was the only one hearing the wrong kind of silence behind the trees. Around 11 p.m., I decided to head in, didn't bother locking up the chairs, left the fire burning low, just wanted to be inside. I climbed into bed, left the bedroom door cracked, and faced the wall. I woke to the feeling of someone sitting on the bed. I don't mean a dream or a pressure, I mean the mattress shifted. I felt the dip beside my hip, a weight, real. I froze. I didn't turn around. I just listened. There was no breathing, no movement, no sound at all, just the slow, unmistakable sensation of someone there, not standing over me, but sitting beside me like they were waiting for me to notice. And then I felt fingers. Not gripping, not aggressive, just resting. Cold, damp fingers lightly touching the back of my neck, still, unmoving. I spun around with a shout and grabbed the tire iron from beneath the pillow, swinging out blindly into the dark. No one, but the bed still bore the shape of someone sitting there. The sheet was wet, and on the far wall, just above the small window, someone had drawn, in water or condensation, the shape of a handprint. Not smeared, not random. Just one perfect print, as though placed with care. Deliberate. I slept with the lights on until morning. The next day, I told Russ everything, every detail. I didn't care if he thought I was crazy. I needed someone to hear it. He didn't look shocked. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, pushed his hat back, and said something I'll never forget. "She's still out there," he said. "Seen her myself. Used to be folks blamed her for accidents along that road, then blamed drink or deer or the fog. But she's real, and she's stuck. Never comes out during the day, only at night. Always on that road." "Who is she?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just glanced out the window of the station, where the trees whispered in the wind. "Some say she was a girl from a logging family," he finally said. "Killed in a rollover accident on that stretch back in the 70s. Father was driving, whole rig went off the side and into the ravine. They never found her body, only the driver. Others say she was never real to begin with, just something the forest made. A mimic. A want. A way to pull people off the road." I didn't know what to believe, but I knew I wasn't staying another night. I thanked him, got back in my rig, and headed south, sticking to wide, bright highways for the rest of the week. No back roads, no turnouts, no forests. But the knocking followed, even in populated campgrounds, even in warm places, even in open plains where no tree grew for 50 miles. I'd still wake up to 3 slow knocks. And sometimes, just for a moment, I'd smell that same rotting floral scent in the air, like lilies long forgotten in a coffin. I started avoiding nightfall, where once I'd pull into a quiet forested spot, light a small fire, and settle in for the sound of wind brushing treetops. Now I drove until the last possible light dipped below the horizon. I stayed in truck stops, rest areas, Walmart parking lots, anywhere that smelled like asphalt and bad coffee, instead of wet moss and old trees. But it didn't matter. The knocks came anyway. Always 3. Always between 11:50 p.m. and 3 a.m. Once in a parking lot off I-5 near Redding, California, I woke to find the side door open, not broken, not forced, just unlocked, opened, like someone had walked in and out while I slept. My boots were wet, my keys were on the floor, and on the kitchenette table sat a lily, wilted, white, the stem broken clean like it had been snapped in anger. Another night outside of Reno, I set up cameras, motion detecting, battery-powered, synced to my phone. I told myself I'd catch a raccoon or a curious kid, maybe even prove to myself it was all in my head. I didn't sleep that night, and in the morning, I checked the footage. At 12:17 a.m., the door handle moved. No one was outside, no shadow, no figure. But the handle turned, slowly with tension, like someone testing it, then stopped. At 12:21, the interior lights clicked on. For 7 seconds, no one visible. Then darkness again. At 12:39, the camera facing the bathroom door went to static, and at 1:06, the audio picked up breathing, just behind the driver's seat. Soft, wet, shaky. Then silence. I deleted the footage, not out of fear, not immediately, but because I recognized the rhythm of that breathing. It matched my own, like something was mimicking me, learning me, trying to be me. I drove east through Nevada, Utah, into Colorado. I thought if I put enough distance between me and that road, it would fade, like smoke on the wind. But no matter where I went, the knocks found me. Sometimes they came from the ceiling, sometimes the floor. Sometimes I'd walk back from the gas station and see a smudge on the inside of the windshield, a pale outline of a hand pressed right where the passenger seat should be. I stopped talking to people. What could I say? That I'd picked up a ghost? That she'd climbed inside and stayed? I tried burning sage, letting in light. I even parked outside a church one night in Kansas and left the door wide open until sunrise, daring her to leave. She didn't. It got worse. I began seeing her, not just in reflections or dreams, but seated in the passenger seat while I drove, only visible in my peripheral vision. The outline of her hoodie, the wet denim, the way her head tilted slightly as if always listening. I never looked directly at her. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched. Sometimes I'd whisper, thinking maybe she wanted something, needed to be taken somewhere, buried, remembered. But she never answered. She only knocked. Once, during a fuel stop in Nebraska, I finally broke. I parked in a well-lit station, went inside the RV, and screamed at her, begged her to tell me what she wanted, told her to take something if that's what she needed. My wallet, my keys, my mind. The next morning, the tires were slashed, every one of them. From the inside. I paid for a tow, rented a car, left the RV in a mechanic's lot with a sign that read, "Do not touch." I drove 200 miles east to a Motel 6 and stayed in room 217 for 3 nights, trying to figure out what to do next. I slept through the nights. No knocking, no breathing, no lilies. I thought I was free. Then, the 4th night, just after midnight, someone knocked on the motel door. 3 slow knocks, not from housekeeping, not from other guests, just 3 deliberate knocks. I didn't answer. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, the weight of her presence in the room like fog rolling in under the door. The air smelled faintly of mildew. The sound of dripping water echoed from the bathroom, even though the faucet was shut tight. I knew then it wasn't the RV. It wasn't the forest. It was me. She'd chosen me. Or maybe I'd chosen her, the moment I stopped that night on that winding road outside Tillamook. Maybe the act of seeing her, really seeing her, was enough to open the door. The next day, I drove back to the mechanic, back to the RV, back to toward Oregon. I had to know. I had to end it. I drove without music, without podcasts, just the sound of tires over asphalt, wind pressing at the cracks in the window seals. The closer I got to the forest, the more I felt her presence tighten like a noose around my lungs. There was no logic left, no rational explanation. This wasn't about roads or ghosts or hauntings anymore. This was personal, intimate, like something had grown inside my rib cage and made a home in the hollow of my chest, and I couldn't tell where I ended and she began. By the time I reached Tillamook, the rain had started. A slow, constant drizzle that seemed to rise up from the earth instead of falling from the sky. The roads shimmered. Fog hugged the hills. Every tree looked like it had something to hide. I picked up the RV from the lot. The mechanic gave me a strange look. Said everything checked out, except the wheel wells were scratched from the inside, as if something had tried to claw its way out of the tires. He asked if I wanted the interior cleaned. I said no. It smelled like her again, that sweet, rotting floral smell, like funeral lilies steeped in stagnant creek water. I drove straight to the road. Her road. It hadn't changed. Still narrow, still swallowed by moss-drenched forest, still wrapped in shadows like a serpent coiled around itself. I turned off the headlights and crept forward slowly, feeling every bump in the asphalt like bones under a skin. I passed the curve, 11:52 p.m., and there she was, standing at the edge of the road, exactly where I'd seen her the first time, soaking wet, white hoodie stained and sagging, eyes too large for her face, her hands twitching just slightly. I didn't stop this time. I rolled down the passenger window and said, "Get in." She didn't move. Just watch me pass. And then when I looked in the rearview mirror, she was gone. But the door clicked open and clicked shut, and I felt it, the weight of her in the seat beside me. Not a ghost, not a phantom, something else. I didn't look at her. I kept driving. I don't know how long we rode like that. 5 miles? 10? The road twisted deeper into the woods, a path I didn't remember ever seeing. No signs, no mile markers, just endless green swallowing the world whole. And then the forest opened. To the right, a ravine. Deep, wet, and filled with shattered metal and rusted glass. A wreck. I pulled over and stepped out. The rain was colder now, metallic. I slipped on the wet gravel as I made my way toward the edge. Down below, barely visible through the fog, was the wreck of an old RV. Red stripe faded to pink, the same model as mine, early 2000s, Winnebago Brave. A chill deeper than weather slid down my spine. I stood there, heart pounding, as the full truth unfolded. This was her RV, or had been, and somehow so had mine, like a pattern repeating. A ghost mirrored in steel and glass, a story told again and again until someone finished it. I turned. She was standing beside me now, not in the seat, not in the mirror, right there, beside me. For the first time, she looked at me with something, not anger, not sadness, recognition. I opened my mouth to speak, but she shook her head, and then she stepped forward, 1 foot, then another. Toward the ravine, I shouted, lunged, but there was nothing to grab. Her body passed through the mist like a breath. She vanished into the dark, and the silence swallowed everything. No crash, no splash, just quiet. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting, until I realized the smell was gone. No lilies, no mildew, no weight in my chest. Just me. Just rain. I walked back to the RV and sat in the driver's seat, turned the key, the engine coughed, then caught. The mirrors were clear. The air was light, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt alone in the way I used to love. No presence, no echo, no one staring from the corner of my vision. Just silence. Real, clean silence. Puff. I didn't drive far that night. Just far enough to find a wide shoulder where the trees leaned back and the rain started to ease. I parked, turned off the engine, and let the RV go quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes before a knock. Not the kind that holds its breath, waiting. But real quiet. The kind you feel in your ribs. The kind you forget how much you miss. I sat in the front seat for a long time with the window cracked. The scent of pine and wet gravel drifted in. The dashboard lights hummed a soft green. No shadow in the mirror. No weight in the seat beside me. Just me. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit until then. She wasn't just haunting me. She was mirroring me. Every knock, every reflection, every whispered breath in the dark. It was a shadow of something I'd buried long before I ever rolled down that Oregon road. It wasn't just her grief I was carrying. It was mine. Because the truth is, I had lost someone once. Long before I started living on the road. Long before I bought the Winnebago. A daughter, 16. Gone in a flash flood while we were camping outside Glacier National Park. I'd left her behind for 5 minutes to check the propane system. 5 minutes. When I came back, the river had swallowed half the site. And just like that, she was gone. I never talked about her. Never told a soul after the funeral. I bought the RV, quit my job, and drove. For years, I told myself it was freedom, but I was just running from the silence. And maybe that road, that night, maybe it wasn't random. Maybe she wasn't random. Maybe the forest gave me back the shape of my grief. A girl in a hoodie, young, wet, wordless. Maybe that's all ghosts really are. Grief made visible. And sometimes they get lost, just like we do. That night, I stood outside the RV and walked into the trees. Not far, just enough to feel the forest around me, the wet earth, the weight of the air, and I said her name. Out loud, the name I hadn't said in years. My daughter's name. The only word that ever really meant anything. And for a long moment, the forest listened. The wind picked up, the rain stopped, and in the distance, so faint I almost thought I imagined it, I heard a voice. Thank you. Not from behind me, not from the trees, from inside me. I walked back to the RV, climbed in, closed the door. There were no more knocks that night. No more lilies, no more handprints on the glass. Just sleep. Deep, dreamless sleep. And when I woke for the first time in years, the morning felt new. Like the road ahead was something I hadn't driven yet. Like I had somewhere to go, not just away from, but toward. I'm not saying I was healed. I'm not saying the ghost was a metaphor. She was real as grief, as real as memory, as real as the dirt under your fingernails when you dig deep enough to bury the things you've run from. But she left when I was ready to stop running, and I think that's what she was waiting for. That's what ghosts do in the end. They wait until we remember, until we listen, until we let go. I still drive the back roads. I still find those places where the trees swallow your signal and the night hums a little too loud. But I'm not afraid of the dark anymore because I know who's out there. And I know what it means to carry something that doesn't belong to the road, something that belongs to the part of us we never say out loud. So if you ever find yourself driving a forest road near midnight and you see a girl in a white hoodie, don't stop. Don't pick her up. Don't even look. Just keep going. Because if she chooses you, she won't ride up front. She'll ride inside. And once she's in, she doesn't always leave, unless you're ready to let go of the ghosts you brought with you. The wind always sounds different when you're out in the woods with no one else around. That's something I never noticed until we parked our RV just outside a state forest in Oregon, not one of the popular ones. This place didn't have a name anyone would recognize from glossy brochures or road trip YouTube videos. Just a patch of rough road off Route 138, a pull-through site with a little fire ring barely leveled out. I found it on a user-submitted map of free camping sites, one of those places where the comments either said peaceful and quiet or don't stay here overnight. I should have paid closer attention. I'm Nate, 42, and I've been full-timing in an RV with my wife, Lindsay, for 2 years now. We sold the house after the pandemic, paid off our debts, and bought a used fifth wheel. It was supposed to be freedom, and it is, most of the time. But I think real freedom comes with risks people don't talk about. See, it's one thing to hear a scary story on a podcast. It's another to live through one. It started on a Thursday in late October. We were heading back east from the coast, trying to avoid an incoming storm. I found the site on a whim. It was getting dark, and we didn't want to drive through the mountains in the rain. Lindsay was already uneasy. She always hated pulling off onto unmarked roads, especially the ones with that crushed gravel that makes the whole rig shudder. "This doesn't look like a place anyone else camps," she said. "That's the point," I answered, trying to keep things light. But the quiet wasn't the peaceful kind. It was emptiness. No distant traffic, no wind through tall trees, no birds, just a low static hum in the air like the silence itself was under pressure. We parked, set the stabilizers, and made a quick dinner. By the time we finished, the woods had gone fully dark, swallowing the last color from the trees. The campfire we built barely pushed back the shadows. I tried to laugh it off, crack open a beer, remind myself this was what we wanted: seclusion, nature, a break from crowds. But as night settled in, something felt wrong. Not in a dramatic, horror movie kind of way. Just little things, subtle things. The way the fire wouldn't catch right, even with dry wood and fire starter. The way Lindsay kept glancing into the trees, the way the wind moved in sudden gusts, never constant, never predictable, like something large was exhaling through the branches. I told myself we were just tired. That being too connected to media made us paranoid. But when we finally went inside, locked the door, and climbed into bed, I found myself staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. At 2:13 a.m., we heard the first knock. 3 of them. Soft. Precise. On the door of the RV. We both sat up. "Did you hear?" Lindsay started, but I was already out of bed. I grabbed the flashlight, flicked off all the interior lights, and peered through the window. Nothing. Just pitch black trees, our fire reduced to cold ash. I opened the door slowly. The beam of my flashlight scanned the site. No animals, no people, no tracks in the dirt. But I felt something out there, like the trees were hiding more than just darkness. I locked the door again. We didn't talk, just laid in bed, waiting, trying not to breathe too loud. At 2:17 a.m., it happened again. 3 soft knocks, this time from the back of the RV. That was the moment something inside me changed. Rationality started to crack. You can explain one noise, maybe 2, but perfectly timed knocks, 4 minutes apart on 2 different parts of your RV in a forest with no one else around. I sat up, heart pounding, grabbed my boots. Lindsay was whispering something, praying, maybe. She grew up religious. I didn't. I stepped outside again. The cold was sharp this time, bitter and wrong for the temperature we'd had all day. My flashlight flickered, not out of battery, but like the air itself was thick, resisting the beam. Then I saw it. Not a person. Not an animal. Just movement. Something low, fast, crawling along the base of the trees. I couldn't make out what it was. No details. Just the idea of motion where motion shouldn't be. I backed into the RV and locked the door. "We're leaving," I told Lindsay. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night, that the road out was narrow and rough. I've never packed up so fast in my life. Slides in, jacks up, everything unhooked in less than 10 minutes. As I was pulling out, I saw something in the rearview camera. Just a shape. Pale. Thin, watching from behind the fire ring, not chasing, not waving, just watching. We drove for nearly an hour before we stopped at a truck pullout along the highway. Sat in silence, engine running, headlights on the trees. "What was it?" Lindsay asked, finally. I shook my head. "I don't know, but it knew we were there." The next day, we didn't talk about it. Not really. That was the beginning of something deeper than fear. It was doubt. Doubt in what we thought we knew about the world, about camping, about being alone. Because once you experience something like that, the idea of isolation stops being romantic. It becomes a vulnerability, a risk. And you start to understand that fear, real fear, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the way the wind stops moving, the way the trees fall silent, the way your instincts whisper what your mind refuses to believe. But that was just the first time. We told ourselves it was a one-off, a strange night in a strange place, that maybe the mind plays tricks in the dark, that 2 years of living mobile had worn down our ability to separate fear from fact. But fear doesn't forget. It waits, and sometimes it follows. A week later, we were in Utah, Sand Hollow State Park, with its rust colors and that wide, still reservoir like a mirror reflecting nothing back. It was the kind of place people post about. Sunsets, paddleboards, campfires, picture perfect. But I was still looking over my shoulder. I noticed Lindsay had stopped playing music outside. She used to bring out her little speaker and play quiet folk songs while we cooked or watched the sky. Now silence followed her like a second shadow. She kept the windows shut even in the heat. I caught her checking the locks 3 times before bed. She didn't say it out loud, but we were both thinking the same thing. Whatever that thing was in Oregon, it wasn't just about Oregon. Our 3rd night there, I walked out to the shore by myself. I wanted space. Or maybe I wanted to prove something to myself, that the fear was in my head, that the wind off the water was just wind, that the silence wasn't unnatural, just wide. The moon was bright, half hidden by low clouds. The surface of the reservoir shimmered like glass about to break. I sat down on a rock, staring out into the dark water. And that's when I noticed something strange. There were no stars reflected in the lake, just black. The sky was clear enough. I could see the constellations above. But the lake, it didn't reflect them. It didn't reflect anything. Not the moon, not the clouds, not even me. That was the first warning. The second came when I turned around. There were footprints in the sand. Bare feet. Human, but too long, too narrow. Like someone had drawn feet from memory. I scanned the area. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. I wasn't armed. I didn't carry. All I had was a flashlight clipped to my belt and my instinct telling me to walk. Slowly, calmly, back toward the RV, but I couldn't resist looking back. I took 3 steps, turned around, and the footprints were gone. Not covered, not blown away, just erased, as if they had never been there at all. I didn't tell Lindsay, not that night, not even the next morning. What could I say? The lake didn't reflect my face. Invisible feet walked right up to me, but something had changed in me. The rational part, the part that used to double-check weather reports, that knew every campground's latitude, that calculated mileage and propane usage and tire PSI, was losing ground. I had always believed in logic, in data, in cause and effect. But what do you do when the cause disappears and only the effect remains? We left Utah 3 days earlier than planned. By Arizona, I was dreaming things. Always the same theme. I'd be walking through a campground, but nothing was familiar. RVs twisted into unnatural shapes, campfires that burned cold, people with no faces, just smooth skin and soundless mouths, and always, always something knocking. Always 3 times. I started waking up gasping, convinced something had touched the RV again, but it hadn't. Not physically. Just somewhere behind the walls of the world, like it was pressing through. I started researching forums, old legends, fringe blogs. I stopped looking for what it was and started looking for where. Locations, patterns, places that seemed to pull fear toward them like gravity. That's when I found the name, Black Hollow Camp. A name passed around on threads with no maps, no coordinates, just warnings. If you see the deer, it's already too late. If you hear the water run uphill, do not follow it. The 3rd knock means it found you. The stories didn't agree on much, but they all circled around the same region, northern New Mexico. An unofficial site long since removed from park maps, supposedly closed due to fire damage, though no record of any fire existed. I showed it to Lindsay. She didn't say anything, just closed the laptop. Later that night, I found her throwing out all our paper maps. Every last one, even the backups stored under the bed. If we don't know where it is, she said, we can't go back there. But fear doesn't need a map. That's what I didn't understand at the time. You don't find Black Hollow. Black Hollow finds you. It was New Year's Eve when we started hearing the voices. We were boondocking just outside Sedona. Red rocks, pale dust, cold air settling low in the scrub pines. There were other campers nearby, enough to feel like part of something, not so many that you felt crowded. That in-between zone. Safe, in theory. The day had been uneventful. We hiked a little, made coffee, took pictures. But I couldn't shake a feeling that we were being watched. And not by people. The kind of watching that doesn't need eyes. At midnight, the fireworks started in town, distant pops across the desert sky. Lindsay was asleep, curled into a thick blanket on the recliner. I was outside, standing barefoot on the cold ground, just watching the horizon. That's when I heard the first voice. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't even loud, just clear, unmistakable. Nate, my name, spoken once from the trees. I turned, expecting someone standing nearby. A lost hiker, maybe. A drunk camper wandering too far, but there was nothing. Just the crackle of dead branches in the wind. Then it came again. Closer. Nate. It didn't sound human. It tried to. But the timing was just a little off, like a recording played at the wrong speed. Too slow, too dry, like someone with no lungs trying to mimic breath. I backed up to the RV, my pulse hammering in my ears. I didn't want to call out. Somehow I knew that speaking, responding, would be an invitation, and I wasn't ready to let it in. I locked the door behind me, pulled the blackout shades, checked every window. Lindsay stirred but didn't wake. I couldn't sleep. I sat there listening, holding still. At 2:17 a.m., I heard 3 knocks again, but not on the RV. They came from the ceiling, from the roof. I wanted to believe it was an animal, a bird, maybe a branch fell, but But I knew better. I didn't move. Not for an hour. Not until the sun began to rise and the red rock turned gold with the light. When Lindsay woke, she noticed the change in me immediately. "You're pale," she said, touching my forehead. "I didn't sleep," I answered. Something was here. That was when she admitted she'd heard her name the night before, too. Only once. But it wasn't in her head. She had buried it, hoping it wasn't real. We left again, started driving without a destination, just moving, as if motion could outpace whatever had attached itself to us, like wheels could outrun whispers. But you can't run from something that lives where silence begins. The voices came again in Nevada. This time we were near the Ruby Mountains, isolated, a scenic spot on BLM land just off a rough service road. We'd planned to stay 2 nights. We didn't make it past 1. That night, the voice didn't call my name, it called hers. But it came from inside the RV. I was outside brushing my teeth in the cold, headlamp strapped to my forehead, water bottle in one hand. The night was dead still. And then I heard it right through the wall. Lindsay. Clear. Perfect. Inside. I dropped the bottle, ran in. She was standing frozen by the kitchen counter, one hand still on the faucet, eyes wide. "You heard it," I said. She nodded. "It said your name." I nodded back. We packed in silence. No questions, no logic, no arguing, just instinct. Something had learned our names. Something had crawled beneath the skin of our reality and started pressing in. And now it didn't just want our fear. It wanted acknowledgement, recognition. When something wants you to hear it, it means it's getting close. We drove until dawn. That day, I did something I swore I'd never do. I called my brother. Not because I thought he'd understand, but because I needed to talk to someone who still lived in the world of cause and effect. Someone whose walls weren't eroding. He picked up on the second ring. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I think something's following us." He laughed. "What, like a stalker?" "No, not a person." There was a pause. "Are you guys safe?" "I don't know what that means anymore." I told him some of it. Not all, just enough. He asked if we'd been to Black Hollow. I didn't answer, but that pause was too long. "How do you know about that place?" I asked. He sighed. "Because I went there once, back in college. Me and some guys from the forestry program. We thought it'd be funny. Urban legends. A dare." I waited. "I didn't see anything," he said. "Not directly, but we heard things, felt things. The forest there is wrong. Time stretches. Sound moves weird. We left before midnight. Never went back." "Did anything follow you?" Another pause. "I had dreams for years," he said, "but nothing physical, nothing real." "Why?" "Because it was real for me. That's why. Because whatever had touched Black Hollow had recognized me now, or chosen me. Or maybe I'd answered a question I didn't remember asking. You don't always need to visit the place. Sometimes the place visits you. We started avoiding campgrounds altogether. No more boondocking, no more free-range solitude. We stuck to KOAs, big, well-lit lots, places with playgrounds and full hookups, and diesel trucks parked 10 feet apart. Places with people. The irony was painful. We had started this life to escape the noise of cities, the glare of artificial light, the thin walls of apartment living. Now we clung to them like armor. But it didn't help. The voices stopped. That was almost worse. Because silence is a liar. It pretends nothing is wrong. But it hangs heavy, the kind that makes your ears feel full, like you're underwater, like something is holding its breath just out of reach. We kept driving, Tennessee, Missouri, into the Appalachians. We told ourselves we were going to visit Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but neither of us unpacked. We didn't hike. We didn't even go outside at night. That's where the dream started. It was always the same. I was in the RV, but it was empty. No furniture, no food, just pale walls, the slide-outs closed in, making the space tight and airless. The windows showed nothing, just black. And then I'd hear it, knock, knock, knock. From the inside, I'd look around, heart pounding. But no matter where I turned, the knock always came from just out of view, like I was chasing it in a circle. Then the door would open on its own, and I'd see me, not exactly. Just enough. My clothes, my face, but not my eyes. and it would smile, a smile I've never seen on my own face, and I'd wake up with blood in my mouth from biting my tongue in my sleep. I didn't tell Lindsay about the dreams, not at first. I didn't want to feed it, but one night I woke up to find her sitting straight up in bed staring at the window. "What is it?" I whispered. She didn't look away. "There's someone standing out there." I didn't want to look. I wanted to stay in the warmth, in the illusion of safety. But I forced myself up, pulled the curtain back just a sliver, and froze. It was tall, wrongly tall, bent forward at the neck like it didn't understand how spines worked, thin arms that dangled too low, skin that looked stretched too tight like leather dried in the sun. No eyes, just indentations where they should be. It wasn't doing anything, just standing, and then it knocked. 3 times. I stumbled back, heart jackhammering, mouth dry. Lindsay was shaking. I locked the window, even though that made no sense. We waited, listened, hours passed. At dawn, there were no footprints outside, not even our own. That's when we knew it wasn't tied to the place. It wasn't even tied to us. It was tied to the story. We had heard too much, thought too much, doubted too much. And in that doubt, it had found space. Fear is an invitation. That's what it feeds on. Not terror, not panic. Doubt, the unspoken, the repressed, the questions we don't ask out loud. And once you feel it, once you really see it, you realize something terrifying. It doesn't want to kill you. It wants to live with you, to echo in your routines, to breathe behind your conversations, to stand beside you in the mirror when your reflection's just half a second too late. We started changing our habits. No more camping more than 2 nights in one place. No more mirrors in the RV. No more calling each other by name at night. That last one was my rule. I don't know why. It just felt safer, like it couldn't find you if you didn't announce yourself. But I slipped up. We were in North Carolina, parked behind a gas station, and a storm had knocked out power to the rest stop we'd planned to use, and we were desperate. The parking lot was soaked with rain, the kind that soaks through your shoes and finds your skin no matter what you wear. Lindsay went to the bathroom inside the station, and when she was gone longer than expected, I called out through the door. "Lindsay, you good?" A long silence. Then a voice answered from the stall. "I'm good." But it wasn't her voice. It tried to be. But I know her cadence, the rhythm, the weight of her words. This one was off. Too slow, too bright, like a puppet with perfect teeth. I backed away from the door. 2 minutes later, the real Lindsay walked up behind me, drenched from the rain, a bag of snacks in one hand. "What's wrong?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just shook my head. We left that gas station at 3 a.m., didn't stop until we hit daylight. That was the night I realized something truly awful. It wasn't trying to scare us anymore. It was trying to be us. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror, not because my face had changed, but because something behind my eyes had. I looked the same, but I didn't feel like I was sitting all the way inside my body anymore, like there was something else behind the controls, just watching, waiting for me to blink too long. Lindsay said the same thing one morning, unprompted. She was brushing her teeth, staring into the bathroom mirror when she froze and said, "That's not me." I asked what she meant. She just shook her head and walked away. We started keeping the mirrors covered. Small towels, duct tape, whatever we had. The only time we used them was on driving days, and even then, only the side mirrors, not the bathroom, not the medicine cabinet, not the microwave's reflection. It sounds paranoid. I know that. But you learn after enough nights on the road that paranoia isn't the enemy. Comfort is. Comfort whispers to you. It says, "You're overthinking this." It says, "You're tired." It tells you stories about coincidence and stress and how a trick of the light is just that, a trick. But fear tells the truth. It's the only honest voice left when everything else is lying. We didn't stop RVing. That's the strange part. We could have. We had enough savings to hole up somewhere, rent a place, wait it out, but we didn't because we thought deep down maybe it would follow us there too. Maybe staying still was worse. Maybe movement was the only thing keeping it from settling in. And also, maybe some part of us wanted to see how far it would go. That's how we ended up back in New Mexico. Not Black Hollow. At least not on purpose. Just a dusty BLM site near the Carson National Forest. No trees. Just scrub and sky and those blue-gray mesas in the distance. We pulled in late. No other rigs in sight. The silence felt clean at first, like bleach on a wound. But as the sun went down, the sky changed. It wasn't the color. It was the space. The way the sky felt like it was pushing down, not up. As if the dome of the atmosphere had flipped inside out and was now a mouth ready to close. We didn't talk, just sat at the dinette, lights dimmed, listening. At exactly 10 p.m., the power flickered, once, then again, then silence. Everything shut off. No fans, no fridge hum, no lights, just black. And then, in that perfect dark, the knocking started again. But not just 3 this time. It was a pattern. 3, pause, 2, pause, 1, pause, 3 again. It circled the RV, roof, wall, rear bumper, steps, hitch. Like it was tapping out code, like it was searching for something. I gripped the counter to keep from screaming. Lindsay held my hand like it was the last thread tethering her to herself, and then the whispering started. From outside. Not loud, not clear, but familiar. Our names? Yes, but also our voices. It was repeating things we'd said in the past, exact phrases, whole arguments, fragments of laughter. It was playing our lives back at us like a broken tape. We closed our eyes, we didn't move, we let it pass, and after an hour, or maybe longer, it did. The power returned. The fridge clicked on. The lights flickered once, the fans whirred back to life. We didn't sleep. In the morning, we checked the dirt outside. Nothing. Not a single footprint. Not ours. Not tire marks. No sign we'd ever been there. We didn't talk about it. Instead, we drove. And as we drove, something in us began to shift. Not out of surrender, but survival. We developed rules. Rule 1, never stay in one place longer than 2 nights. Rule 2, don't use each other's names after dark. Rule 3, no mirrors, no reflections. Rule 4, if you hear a knock, you don't open the door, ever. Rule 5, don't speak to anything that mimics. They weren't written down, but they lived in us like instinct. And yet, even with those rules, we couldn't stop the final change. Because one night in the Arizona desert, something new happened. I woke up to find Lindsay standing by the stove, whispering to the window. She didn't turn around when I called to her. She didn't answer. I got up slowly, walked toward her, placed my hand on her shoulder, and she vanished. Gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. I panicked, tore open the door, ran outside in bare feet, screaming her name. And then I saw her, 20 feet away, curled up in the dirt, crying. She didn't remember getting up, didn't know how she got out there. But she had a single word scratched into her arm, faint but unmistakable. Welcome. Not carved, not bloody, just written. Like a fingertip had drawn it into her skin. That's when I realized something that froze me to my core. It didn't want to kill us. It wanted us to join it, to be part of whatever it was, whatever place it came from. Not spirits, not ghosts, but something older, something that doesn't live in our rules of reality, something that wears fear like a mask and learns from us every time we flinch. Black Hollow wasn't a location, it was a threshold, and somewhere along the line, we crossed it. We stopped trying to explain it. The need for answers burned itself out. What was left wasn't curiosity, it was endurance. Just waking up each day without something missing. Something vital like memory, or language, or identity. We became shadows of ourselves. We avoided mirrors, not just out of fear, but because they started telling the truth. Not about the world, about us. The way our eyes didn't quite track right. The way our mouths opened just a little too wide when we weren't looking directly at them. The way our reflections sometimes lingered a half second too long after we moved. We weren't being haunted. We were being rewritten. One morning in Wyoming, I caught Lindsay watching the sunrise through the RV window. Her face was blank, not peaceful, blank, like she was trying to remember how to be herself. She looked at me and asked, "What was my middle name again?" I told her. She nodded slowly. Right. That's what I thought. But I could tell she didn't believe me. That night, I dreamed of a campground with no roads in or out, just rows and rows of RVs. All white, all clean, all identical. No signs of life. And in each window, I saw versions of us, smiling, staring, waiting. When I woke, I had a taste in my mouth like ash and burnt sugar, and a word in my mind I didn't recognize. Fallow. I didn't know what it meant, but I couldn't stop hearing it. Whispers on the road signs, in the static of the radio, in the groan of the RV walls as we drove into windstorms. Fallow. I looked it up. It means unused land, left to rest, waiting. Waiting for what? We found a tiny RV park in Nebraska, 6 sites. No hookups. The kind of place retirees pass through in spring where the only sound at night is the wind in the cornfields. We weren't supposed to stop, but something told me we needed to. I didn't know it then, but this was going to be the place. The place where everything either ended or changed. The owner was an old man named Jasper. He came out of the office with a limp and a cigarette that wasn't lit, just dangling there like a memory. "You folks passing through?" he asked. I hesitated, Lindsay answered. "Just for the night." He gave us Site 3. I asked if anyone else was here. "Not tonight," he said, "but sometimes folks come through. They don't always leave." I looked at him. He smiled without teeth. "I mean, they like it here," he clarified. Quiet, peaceful. We backed into the site and plugged in, even though nothing really worked right anymore. Our microwave clock blinked 12 endlessly, no matter how many times I reset it. The battery monitor said we were at 110% charge. We didn't go outside that evening, not even to eat. The wind picked up just before midnight, but it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like a low moan stretched across miles, not directional, not weather, more like a resonance, like the land itself was sighing. Then came the lights, tiny pinpricks dancing on the edge of the field. I thought it was fireflies at first, but there was no flutter, no movement, just steady glow, like embers held in place. And the more I stared, the more I saw shapes behind them, figures, standing still, watching. I called Lindsay to the window. She didn't speak, just stood beside me, her breath fogging the glass. They weren't coming closer. Not yet, but I knew they would. Around 2:17 a.m., we heard the footsteps on the roof again. Slow this time, deliberate. Lindsay grabbed my hand. "I think we should let it in," she said quietly. I turned to her, shocked. "What?" She didn't look away from the ceiling. "I'm tired, Nate. Aren't you tired?" "Yes," I whispered, "but not like that." She squeezed my hand, but it wasn't affection. It was a test. I knew it then. Whatever this thing was, it had been slowly replacing parts of us, testing the seams, trying to find where it could make the final push. I had to do something final. So I stepped outside. No flashlight, no jacket, just me. The night was cold and perfect and still. If the lights were gone, but the shapes were closer now, and in front of them, maybe 10 feet away, stood a version of me. My face, my clothes, my stance, but not my mind. It smiled at me, like it knew something I didn't. Then it tilted its head and opened its mouth, and my voice came out. "Are you ready yet?" I took a step back. It took a step forward. "Soon, you won't have to be afraid," it said. "Soon, you won't have to remember anything at all." That's when I realized what it really wanted. It didn't want to kill us. It wanted to consume us, not our bodies, but ourselves, our memories, our identity, to wear us like costumes, to fill our RVs, drive our roads, wave to our neighbors, and no one would ever know. No one would notice, because it had learned how to pretend. And then it asked, "Do you want peace, Nate?" I didn't answer. I just turned around and walked back into the RV. When I got inside, Lindsay looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Her hands were trembling. "What did it say?" she asked. I sat down slowly, pulled her close, and whispered, "It wants to make the world full of people who don't remember who they were."